Chapter 2636. As for Grasshopper and Shui Zhangjing, they were the elites chosen by Qi Lingyun. According to Lu Xiangxue, Grasshopper and Shui Zhangjing both came from the eternal world, especially Shui Zhangjing, who was a peerless figure from the sixth heaven. Both of them had been cultivating in Chaotian City for decades and had left their names on the Xian list. They were highly regarded by many powerful forces in the seventh heaven. But both of them refused. It wasn't until they won in the first round of the God's Relic that they were recruited by Qi Lingyun. They are naturally very happy to be able to enter the eighth heaven for cultivation, and they are extremely respectful to Qi Lingyun. After learning all this, Lin Sun realized that Grasshopper and Shui Zhangjing were nothing more than talents that Qi Lingyun fancied. Lin Sun still had one thing he didn't understand. How could Grasshopper beat you up so badly with his ability? Xiang Xiaoyuan said, Grasshopper doesn't have such ability. It was Lin Feng who attacked first and seriously injured my uncle, giving Grasshopper a chance. A wisp of hatred appeared between Xiang Xiaoyuan's brows when she spoke of Qing Fu. This disaster was completely caused by this person. He saw through my and uncle's identities and said that as long as he captured us, he would be able to force Brother Lin to show himself. At that time, we would be able to see if Brother Lin is as strong as the rumors say. These words aroused Qi Lingyun's interest to the extent that he didn't finish his words, but his meaning was clear. Grasshopper may be the culprit, but Qi Lingyun can't get away with it either. No matter what, it's all because of me. Lin Sun's black eyes were terrifyingly cold. Brother Lin, don't fight with that woman. It's best not to provoke her. Xiang Xiaoyuan said hurriedly. That's right. The Qi clan is located in the 8th celestial region, and their might is so great that they can cover many of the celestial regions in Eternal True World. My young friend, you're traveling alone right now. There is simply no need for you to fall out with them. Lu Xiangke also tried to dissuade him. Lin Sun nodded and smiled. Don't worry, you two. I know what I'm doing. But Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangxue couldn't guess what they were thinking. In the following time, they began to meditate and heal their wounds, while Lin Sun strolled around the lake. It was already the third day of the Great Hunt. In a few more hours, this trial would come to an end. Lin Sun did not have to guess to know that the more it was like this, the crazier the fighting and killing in the Great Void Immortal Domain would be. But none of these could affect Lin Sun. Moreover, he didn't plan on hunting anymore. Up until now, he had already accumulated 43 kills through the Message Talisman. In the entire Great Void Immortal Realm, there were probably few who could match up to him. His only regret was that he did not have the chance to eliminate the experts of the Gu clan and the Yun clan. Time flew by. During this period of time, many cultivators who were in a frenzy of killing swept past this place. When they saw Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xiaoyuan, who were meditating and recuperating, they were originally aggressive and thought that they had caught their prey. However, when they saw the tall figure that was strolling by the lake, they instantly felt their scalps go numb, and they turned around and left without daring to delay in the slightest. When they confirmed that the tall figure didn't chase after them, they couldn't help but feel fortunate as if they'd survived a calamity. Who in the Great Void Immortal Realm didn't know Lin Sun's bloody and valiant record? It was no exaggeration to say that in the eyes of those cultivators, Lin Sun was the most dangerous person. As long as they were not stupid, no one was willing to face him head-on. Lin Sun fought head-on. This was the power of killing. Until a touch of night emerged above the sky of the Great Void Immortal Realm, the experts distributed in different areas all breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. This meant that 3 days had passed, and the second trial, the Great Hunt, was over. It's finally over. Lin Sun looked at Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangxue and said, You too, the third trial has begun. I'll go first. As soon as his voice fell, a star-like silver light fell from the sky, wrapped Lin Sun's whole body, and disappeared on the spot. Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xiaoyuan silhouettes were also bathed in 2 rays of silver celestial light at this instant and disappeared. On the same platform, Lin Sun's figure emerged out of thin air. The vast field was filled with white mist, but there was the origin of Taoism, which had turned into a scroll and spread out. Buzz on his body, the talismans that recorded numerous records of military achievements flew out, buzzing and trembling in the void, as if they were sensing and summoning something. Lin Sun held his breath and waited calmly. Just like the first trial, after the end of the second trial, those with higher military achievements would get more generous rewards. Swish! It wasn't long before a peerlessly dazzling violet immortal light charged out from within the boundless white mist, and it revolved in space before transforming into a translucent and crystalline violet immortal sword. The sword was only the size of a palm, 2 fingers wide, and its blade was as bright and translucent as a crystal. There were 2 majestic immortal characters engraved on the sword, exterminating immortal. But looking closely, this sword was sealed by layers of mysterious immortal prohibitions, so that the aura it radiated was full of obscurity. Lin Sun's heart shook, and he raised his hand to summon it. Instantly, the purple immortal sword called Celestial Extermination fell into Lin Sun's hand, and a peerless, icy cold, killing intent spread in Lin Sun's palm. It was piercingly sharp, and it caused Lin Sun's body to stiffen abruptly. He operated his cultivation to counteract this killing intent. His black eyes lit up, and he realized that the reward this time was extremely extraordinary. It should be known that this sword was still in a sealed state, but the killing intent it overflowed with was so terrifying. It could be imagined how terrifying its true power would be when the seal was undone. However, when Lin Sun intended to break the seal, he was shocked to find that the layers of prohibitions actually contained traces of the aura of order, and it seemed extremely mysterious and terrifying. With his current strength, he was unable to comprehend its secrets, let alone break it. Even so, Lin Sun was still amazed in his heart. This sword needed to be sealed with the power of prohibitions filled with the aura of order. So how could it be compared to ordinary treasures? Celestial extermination. Celestial extermination. For such a treasure to appear in the central immortal court, I'm afraid it's one of the few immortal weapons in the world of immortals. Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder if this celestial extermination sword that had survived from the last era was an immortal weapon. What about the others? What kind of rewards did they get? Will they also get such a miraculous treasure? Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. In fact, Lin Sun didn't know that his achievements were far higher than the second place, and he was the well-deserved first place in the Great Hunt battle. Therefore, he obtained the celestial extermination sword that had been sealed. This was also a supreme treasure hidden in the central immortal court, and in the world of immortals in the last era, it was enough to make any cultivator fight madly for it. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun intended to put the sword away, but he unexpectedly found that the sword actually produced a great repulsive force. The abyssal sword cauldron couldn't tolerate it, and this scene undoubtedly showed that this sword was even more extraordinary. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun opened his mouth and swallowed, and the sword turned into a ray of purple light that flowed into the imperial realm in his body. Buzz, as it was wrapped by the power of the Great Way in the imperial realm, the celestial extermination sword sprinkled a magnificent rain of purple light, like wisps of sharp sword light, which looked extremely magical. And Lin Sun also keenly noticed that the immortal prohibition seal on the sword showed a faint sign of being refined, but it was so subtle that it was almost imperceptible. This made him refreshed, and he realized that as long as he nurtured this sword, with the continuous improvement of his cultivation, he would be able to break the seal on the sword layer by layer. Interesting. A trace of smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. Whoosh! The next moment, the platform under his feet shook, and Lin Sun disappeared. In the last era, the third stage of the Battle of the Chosen One was called Ascension. This was also the last stage. As long as one could walk out of the Ascension, he could enter the central immortal court and obtain the supreme, secret inheritance. With a flash of white light, Lin Sun had already appeared on a cliff platform halfway up the mountain. The cliff platform was so wide that it could accommodate tens of thousands of people. Immortal clouds were curling up, and divine light was flowing. On the top of the mountain above the cliff platform stood a grand and majestic palace, like the legendary heavenly court, which was bathed in endless Taoist light. Looking from afar, it gave people the feeling that it was the dwelling place of the gods, the central place of the universe, representing the supreme and supreme. Central Immortal Court. Lin Sun recognized at a glance that this was the Central Immortal Court, which represented the supreme and unique place of immortals in the last era. It was the dominating place in the hearts of billions of cultivators in the 4,900 continents of the immortal world. Stay away. Be careful, merciless Lin is coming. There was a burst of whispers nearby. Lin Sun glanced around and found many cultivators standing on the cliff platform. There were Gu Banzwang, Yin Luohong, and other people from the two immortal imperial clans, as well as some other familiar faces. Lin Sun even saw Qi Lingyun in a long dress, holding a scroll in her hand, Lin Feng in plain clothes, and Shui Zhangjing in black clothes. Along with his appearance on the cliff, it caused a wave of restlessness, and many cultivators subconsciously avoided him and kept a distance from him. There was fear and seriousness in their expressions, and they looked at Lin Sun as if he was a dreadful beast. Soon, Lin Sun saw Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xianxue. He nodded imperceptibly and withdrew his gaze. It was similar to the situation in the first stage. On the cliff platform, everyone's cultivation was suppressed by the power of the rules of heaven and earth, and they couldn't act rashly. To Lin Sun's surprise, only a little over 300 cultivators were able to enter the stage of the Ascendant. After all, there were almost 30,000 cultivators participating in the first test, and there were almost 3,000 participants in the second test as well. But only these people made it to the third stage. It could be imagined that more than 2,000 powerful cultivators lost their lives in the Great Hunt. This was a shocking number. Those who died were all Emperor Realm existences who had won 9 consecutive victories in the arena. Among them, the weakest was at the peak of the 7th level. But now they were all buried in the great void immortal realm. It was chilling to think about it. P.S. Additional updates will be sent to you. If you are surprised, please use your monthly votes to encourage the goldfish. Chapter 2637. More than 300 people. To be able to survive the great void immortal realm, no matter how many achievements they have, is not something ordinary people can achieve. In fact, Lin Sun has already noticed that among the people present, except for the big forces like the Gu clan and the Yun clan, who relied on a strong lineup to enter the Ascendant stage, there are many fierce characters who have gone through layers of screening and killed their way out. For example, Song Fuxing and the Man with a Blade are among them, and characters like Qi Lingyun and Lin Feng are undoubtedly more dangerous. What surprised Lin Sun the most is that there is no lack of characters like Qi Lingyun and Lin Feng. "You're Lin Sun?" A young man wearing a fiery feather robe squatted on the ground, holding a green leaf in his mouth, suddenly smiled and said. Lin Sun looked at him. "What's the matter?" The young man showed a harmless smile and said, "Let's get to know each other. My name is Zhongli Shao. If there's a chance, I want to exchange pointers with you. Of course, I have no malicious intent. It's just a pure exchange. If you agree, no matter the result, I will be happy to be your guide and take you to the 8th heaven." Zhongli Shao. Even if they don't know this person, just hearing his surname shocked many people, because this is the surname of one of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven. "Let's talk about it later," Lin Sun said perfunctorily. The young man Zhongli Shao smiled and didn't say much. He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep leisurely. But someone clapped and laughed. Interesting, Zhongli Shao also has a time when he was rejected. This is very rare. The person who spoke was wearing a tall hat and a broad belt. He carried a sword case on his back, and his sleeves fluttered in the wind. He looked divine and mighty. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a pair of silver symbols flashing in his pupils, sharp and terrifying. The crowd was restless again. Zhongli Shao must be an immortal giant from the 8th heaven. But now, someone dared to tease him like this. How could his identity be simple? Soon, this person's identity was revealed. His name is Mu-E, an immortal giant from the eighth heaven. You still have many rare things. Don't make a fuss. Zhong Lixiao curled his lips, his face full of disdain. Mu-Yi's eyes surged with a terrifying divine light. Why don't you and I find a chance to exchange pointers? Zhong Lixiao said, All right, as long as you dare to use the Crimson Thorn as a wager, I'll play with you. The Crimson Sting. It was one of the most powerful Dao weapons of the Mu clan. It was known as eternally imperishable under Crimson. He is extremely famous in the eighth heaven. At this moment, everyone could see that there was enmity between Zhong Lixiao and Mu-E. If that's the case, I'll also participate in such a spar. Suddenly, a man with unkempt hair, cold eyes that were like swords, and his entire body was suffused with a dark gray glow spoke. He stood there like a god of swords in the darkness, and even if his cultivation was suppressed, it still caused one's heart to palpitate with fear. Zhong Lixiao and Mu-E sneered and stopped speaking. However, it was faintly discernible that they felt a trace of fear towards this man with unkempt beard and hair. Seeing this scene, everyone present looked at each other in dismay. No one dared to say anything for fear of being involved in the battle between the immortal giants of the eighth heaven. In fact, in everyone's eyes, whether it was Zhong Lixiao, Mu-E, or the man with unkempt hair, they were all existences that couldn't be offended. Even the top forces of the seventh heaven, such as the Gu clan and the Yun clan, had to bow their heads in the face of such nobles. That's enough. How can we really make a move in this kind of place? Don't let the people here laugh at us. Otherwise, they will think that the people of the eighth heaven are all shameless, boastful people. Qi Lingyun's voice was as elegant as an orchid. She looked at the man with unkempt hair and smiled. Qi Pejuan, if you want to participate, why don't we have a bet on who will be able to ascend the heaven's chosen road and reach the central immortal court? What do you think? Qi Pejuan. Hearing such a unique surname, everyone seemed to finally realize the identity of the man with unkempt hair, and their expressions changed. The eighth heaven is controlled by the 10 immortal giants. Each of them has monstrous power, enough to deter all living beings in the eternal true world. Among them, the forces of the Qi clan and the Qi clan can firmly rank in the top 4. But as for who is ranked 3rd and who is ranked 4th, there has been a constant debate. In short, in the eighth heaven, some people regard the Qi clan as the 3rd giant, while others regard the Qi clan as the 3rd giant. This debate has existed for a long time, and until now, there's been no clear answer. After understanding these inside stories, everyone also understood that if the Zhongli clan and the Mu clan are at odds, then the Qi clan and the Qi clan are also competitors who fight openly and secretly. What do you want to bet? Qi Pejuan said without hesitation, his eyes cold and fierce. Qi Lingyun, who was wearing a long dress and holding a scroll in her hand, smiled and looked at Lin Sun, who had been staying out of the matter, and said, If I win, please come forward and persuade this fellow Taoist Lin Sun to obediently bow down to me. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned, and their expressions were strange. It seemed that they didn't expect that Qi Lingyun would use subduing Lin Sun as a bet. A cold light flashed in the depths of Lin Sun's black eyes, and he didn't say anything. A wisp of detest and killing intent had arisen in his heart, and he'd sentenced this seemingly elegant, quiet, and aloof woman to death. Bow down to me? If there's a chance in the future, let's see who will bow down to whom. Qi Pejuan glanced at Lin Sun. Although he was slightly puzzled, he still said without hesitation, What if you lose? Then I'll give you a piece of immortal gold essence in my hand. How about it? Qi Lingyun said. Instantly, the hearts of many emperor ancestors trembled. Immortal gold essence. It was a legendary treasure that belonged to the immortal realm, and even a thumb-sized piece of it could make immortals fight to the death for it. Qi Pejuan raised his eyebrows and said, All right. Hey, you're doing this deliberately. Will the one and only chosen one, who can enter the central immortal court, be born from the two of you? Zhong Lixiao spoke with a displeased expression. You can bet as well. Qi Lingyun smiled gently. My request is the same as before. If you lose, help me persuade Taoist Lin Sun. If you win, I'll give you a piece of immortal gold essence. Up until now, if the crowd still didn't know that Qi Lingyun was targeting Lin Sun, then they would have lived for so many years in vain. For a moment, they looked at Lin Sun with pity in their eyes. How could vicious Lin, who had killed countless people in the great void immortal realm, offend a noble from the eighth heaven? All right, Zhong Lixiao didn't care about Lin Sun's feelings. In fact, whether it was him or Qi Pejuan, when they made the decision to bet, they didn't care about these things. They came from eighth heaven, and the environment they grew up in, as well as what they had seen and heard since they started cultivating, made them look down on anyone below the eighth heaven. This wasn't arrogance, but a natural disposition that was branded in their bones. In their eyes, people who didn't belong to the eighth heaven didn't belong to the same world as them. They didn't need to pretend to be humble and low-key, but it depended on who they were dealing with. To put it bluntly, no matter how dazzling Lin Sun's previous achievements were, how heaven-defying and extraordinary in their eyes, he was nothing more than a character that they were interested in, a person that they could recruit to serve them. Just like Lin Feng, who was beside Qi Lingyun. How dazzling and powerful was he? But now, he was just a worshiper of the Qi clan, and a protector who followed Qi Lingyun. It was true that in the eternal true world, Lin Feng was already an extraordinary existence, but in the eyes of the 10 immortal giants of the eighth heaven, he was just a worshiper who could be cultivated. Compared to this, Lin Sun's weight in the hearts of the eighth heaven's nobles was roughly the same. Of course, this was very uncomfortable, but in the eyes of the people present, especially the cultivators from the Gu clan and the Yun clan, this was a matter of course. A matter of course was enough to show how monstrous the power of the 10 giants was in the eternal true world. After countless years, this influence had long been deeply rooted in people's hearts. In that case, I'm also willing to participate. Mu Yi also spoke, attracted by the immortal gold essence promised by Qi Lingyun. Qi Lingyun smiled calmly and nodded. Okay. Then, she looked at Lin Sun and said, Lin Sun, do you now understand how important you are to me? My conditions haven't changed. Before the matter of the god's relic ends, as long as you agree to serve me, I don't mind getting you any cultivation resources you want. The crowd was in an uproar. In the eyes of many people, this was definitely a great thing that made them envious and jealous. As long as they agreed, they could enter the eighth heaven to cultivate, and their fate would change accordingly. But Lin Sun became more and more unhappy. He glanced at Qi Lingyun and said, Why don't I also make a bet? If I lose, I can give you my life. If you lose, I don't want your life. I just want you to slap yourself and scold yourself. How about that? There was a sudden silence in the field, and everyone couldn't help but gasp. Was Lin Sun crazy? Even Zhong Lixiao, Mu Yi, Qi Pejuan, and others were stunned for a moment. They seemed to be very surprised that Lin Sun dared to provoke and humiliate Qi Lingyun. Wasn't he courting death? Gu Banzwang, Yin Luohong, and others couldn't help but look strange. It seemed that this guy not only didn't fear them, but also didn't take the Qi clan of the eighth heaven seriously. There was silence in the field. Everyone turned to look at Qi Lingyun in unison. The elegant woman in a long dress, holding a scroll in her hand, didn't show any emotion at the moment. She was still as indifferent as before. But when she looked at Lin Sun keenly noticed that there was a hint of killing intent in this woman's heart. However, Lin Sun didn't care about this and said, What? You don't dare to bet? There was undisguised sarcasm in his voice. Qi Lingyun suddenly laughed, staring at Lin Sun, and said softly, Lin Sun, do you think you are qualified to participate in this bet? Wake up. You're just a wager. Chapter 2638. Her voice was very calm, as if she was stating a fact, but the disdain in her voice was clear. She was saying, Who do you think you are? How dare you participate in this bet? Zhong Lixiao, Mu Yi, and Qi Pejuan laughed. The attitude shown by Qi Lingyun was exactly what they were most familiar with and understood, because people like them really disdained to bet with unqualified people. Lin Sun didn't get angry. He just smiled and didn't say anything more. because whatever he said would be regarded as unqualified by the other party, and the power of words was often the weakest at this time. Since it was useless to say more, there was no need to talk nonsense. What eighth heaven, immortal giants, when he surpassed them one day, he would ask them what qualification was, and he believed that the answer would be completely different from now. A burst of ethereal, immortal music suddenly sounded at this moment, followed by a golden road, which spread down from the center of the mountain where the immortal court was located and fell on the cliff plateau halfway up the mountain. The immortal light was dense, and the golden light was steaming. This road led directly to the center of the mountain peak, the immortal court. This was the road to the top. It was also called the road chosen by heaven. Only the strongest had the ability to set foot on it, and then live in the center of the immortal court. More than 300 cultivators on the cliff plateau became restless, their eyes shining, and they were ready to take action. In the last era, the third stage of the competition was to challenge this road chosen by heaven. No matter who it was, they only had one chance. Once they couldn't pass this road and reach the highest point of the central immortal court, they would be eliminated. According to rumors, on the road chosen by heaven, there were battle marks left by the strongest in each battle of heaven. Once you set foot on it, you would face the battle power left by the strongest immortal cultivators. It must be known that the heavens' chosen battle of the last era was held once every 100,000 years. Every time it was held, only one ultimate powerhouse would emerge victorious and become the heavens' chosen. One could imagine how terrifying the battle brand left behind by such an ultimate powerhouse would be. I'll go first. Suddenly, a peerless figure rushed out. The moment he set foot on the road chosen by heaven, his suppressed cultivation was immediately restored, and he showed the terrifying power that belonged to the peak of the 8th level of Great Emperor. But he'd only walked a few hundred meters before his body seemed as if it was struck by a mountain torrent, and it was blasted flying with a bang before falling onto the cliff. His expression was filled with unwillingness and shock. It seemed as if that distance of a few thousand meters from before had caused him to experience something terrifying. The path of heaven's chosen is filled with the mysterious aura of space and time. Walking on it is like walking on the river of time from the previous era. You will encounter one opponent after another that was formed by the strongest. Someone said in a low voice, just now, that person seemed to have only walked a few thousand meters, but to him, he probably experienced a cycle of time. Even 1,000 years in an instant wouldn't amount to much. The expressions of many in the surroundings had become solemn. An 8th great martial emperor who had fought his way through the layers of selection in the arena defense, and the great hunt was extremely powerful. But now, he had only walked a few hundred zhang before he was eliminated, and there was a total of 3,000 zhang to reach the immortal court at the center of the mountain peak. There is only one heaven's chosen one. Don't overestimate yourselves. Zhong Lixiao chuckled. Let me give it a try. An imperial ancestor walked forward. When he stepped foot onto the path of heaven's chosen, he erupted with terrifying might that caused everyone to look at him in surprise. But in the end, he merely walked 3 kilometers before he staggered and was blasted flying. He fell onto the cliff, and he even coughed up blood without end while his gaze dimmed down. He was actually injured. This scene caused some of the cultivators in the surroundings to be unable to help but feel nervous, and no matter how conceited they were, they couldn't help but feel pressured. Even an imperial ancestor could only advance 3 kilometers. This path of the heavens chosen that belonged to the last era was undoubtedly too abnormal. In the following period of time, numerous cultivators moved forward. However, practically without exception, all of them stopped within 3 kilometers of the path of the heavens chosen and were eliminated. It was like that distance was a barrier that was extremely difficult to surmount. The atmosphere in the surroundings grew even more oppressive along with this, and the mental states of some cultivators couldn't help but be slightly shaken. Indeed, there was no danger in the path of ascension, and they didn't have to worry about perishing. However, This extremely cruel elimination rate was still too terrifying, and it caused a shadow to appear in the hearts of these formidable figures who'd experienced numerous slaughters and arrived here with great difficulty. It should be known that figures like them practically represented the peak of the imperial realm. Yet they were actually unable to overcome the battle brands left behind on the path of the heavens chosen. Lin Sun had been watching from the side with a calm expression. However, he couldn't help but be shocked in his heart. The cruelty of the path of the heavens chosen had exceeded his expectations. As time passed, finally, someone passed through the distance of 3 kilometers. It was Yun Luohong from the Yun clan, an extremely formidable imperial ancestor. This caused many people to be excited, and they finally saw some hope. But in next to no time, Yun Luohong was defeated as well. When he reached the distance of 3 kilometers, he was washed away by an expanse of golden light and fell down fiercely. His face was pale and unsightly, and his eyes were filled with surprise and bewilderment. No one knew what kind of battles an imperial ancestor like him had experienced, but they couldn't help but feel sad when they saw an existence like him being defeated halfway. After observing for a long time, Lin Sun decided not to wait any longer. Whether it was success or failure, he had to give it a try. There were many people who had similar ideas as him. At least until now, no one had chosen to give up. However, just as Lin Sun took a step, he saw a figure had already rushed forward. The figure was wearing a high hat and ancient clothes, with big sleeves fluttering, and a pair of E symbols emerging in his eyes. It was Mu Yi. Since you're not qualified to bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself? He glanced at Lin Sun with a smile and went straight to the path of the heavens chosen. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and stood in place. He wanted to see where Mu Yi could go. At this time, all eyes fell on Mu Yi. They all wanted to see whether this noble figure from the 8th heaven could reach the top in one fell swoop. Mu Yi's performance was indeed different from the others before. It was extremely extraordinary. In a few blinks of an eye, he reached the distance of 3 kilometers, causing many exclamations in the field. But after arriving here, his speed slowed down, but he still seemed very calm. Almost under everyone's gaze, he reached the distance of 3 kilometers step by step and continued to advance towards the last 3 kilometers. This shocked many cultivators. They had to admit that Mu Yi from the 8th heaven was indeed powerful and admirable. At this time, Zhong Li Xiao couldn't help but ask, Qi Lingyun, if Mu Yi, Qi Pejuan and I all reach the top, I'm afraid you won't have enough immortal pure gold in your hands, right? Qi Lingyun said indifferently, Don't worry, even if all of you reach the top, only one person can become the chosen. At that time, it will depend on who can reach the top in the shortest time. Zhong Li Xiao thought for a moment and said with a smile, It seems that if I want to beat you, I can only become the only chosen. Qi Lingyun said, Do you think it's so easy to get the immortal pure gold? However, the expected situation didn't happen. When Mu Yi reached the 2,900-foot mark, his figure, which had already seemed to be difficult to walk, suddenly trembled, and then he was directly knocked out, turned into an arc, and fell on the cliff platform. Bang! His figure staggered, and when he finally stood firm, his hair was disheveled, his face was livid, and his eyes were full of anger and unwillingness. He seemed to have lost his composure. This scene made the audience fall into a dead silence. Even someone as powerful as Mu Yi had been eliminated. Zhong Li Xiao, who was originally complacent, couldn't help but reveal a solemn expression. He was well aware of Mu Yi's strength, but he was mercilessly pushed back in the last 300 m, and this caused him to feel pressure that assaulted his face. Qi Lingyun, Qi Pejuan, and others felt the same. Mu Yi's defeat made them, who had absolute confidence in themselves, feel the horror of the ascendant. Since you've already participated in the bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself? In this silence, Lin Sun suddenly laughed, returning Mu Yi's words just now, and the sarcasm was not concealed at all. Mu Yi's handsome face suddenly became gloomy, and his eyes were full of anger and killing intent. He said, If you have the guts, say it again. Everyone's heart trembled, and it was difficult to understand. Mu Yi's defeat had already made him furious, but Lin Sun's sarcasm at this time was like sprinkling salt on the wound. At this time, facing the incomparably angry Mu Yi, Lin Sun seemed to be very obedient and said seriously, "Since you've already participated in the bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself?" Mu Yi was so angry that his lips trembled, but his cultivation was suppressed again, so he couldn't do anything at all. Otherwise, he would have attacked at the first moment. Lin Sun said with a smile, "No need to say more. You've already failed in your so-called bet, and I, Lin Sun, don't need a loser like you to persuade me, because you're not qualified." There was a dead silence. Everyone was dumbfounded and completely shocked by Lin Sun's words. How could this guy be so daring? Was he really not afraid of death? Or was he completely desperate? Mu Yi was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. He pointed at Lin Sun with a trembling finger and said, "Lin Sun, I'll remember you. Just you wait." Lin Sun laughed and didn't bother to pay attention to Mu Yi. When he was about to take action, he found that Zhong Lixiao had also started to take action. "What? Do you want to repeat his mistakes and rush to prove yourself first?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Zhong Lixiao's figure stagnated, and he turned his head to stare at Lin Sun. "Lin Sun, I have a good impression of you. Don't make me hate you." Lin Sun said, "Using me as a bet is called a good impression? I'm sorry, I can't afford this kind of good impression. Please be magnanimous and take back your so-called good impression." Zhong Lixiao was angry, and his eyes were full of killing intent. "If you really want to die, wait until we leave the God's Relic, and I'll fulfill your wish. P.S. I'll continue to update tonight. I'm eager to get monthly votes for encouragement." Chapter 2639. After that, Zhong Lixiao turned around and rushed to the golden chosen road. Lin Sun smiled and didn't care about the strange gazes cast on him. He had already offended the 4 clans of the East Imperial family. "I'm sure that you're a person who is not afraid of death, but do you think it's worth it to get yourself killed because of what happened today?" Not far away, Qi Lingyun asked, "Let's see who can survive until the end." Lin Sun said casually, as if he didn't care about these things at all. This made many people secretly admire him. In this world, even the powerful ancestors and the terrifying immortals, who dares to be as fearless as Lin Sun when facing the clansmen of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven? Qi Lingyun said softly, "Then I might as well say that if I can't subdue people like you, I would rather destroy you." The clouds were calm and the wind was gentle, but that kind of threat was enough to make anyone feel cold. In this regard, Lin Sun only said, "Oh," and didn't look at Qi Lingyun again from beginning to end. "So strong," someone exclaimed. Everyone followed the gaze and saw that on the chosen road, Zhong Lixiao's figure had already crossed 2,000 feet and was advancing towards the top of the mountain. Compared with Mu Yi just now, he was not much weaker, until seeing his figure approaching 2,900 feet step by step. Everyone in the field couldn't help but hold their breath and watch nervously. And when they saw Zhong Lixiao's figure crossing 2,900 feet and still had the power to move forward, the field was already restless. This had surpassed Mu Yi's performance just now. "I haven't seen this guy for many years. It seems that he has obviously hidden a lot of strength before," Qi Pujuan said in surprise. He had seen that Zhong Lixiao's performance at the moment was obviously stronger than they knew. Humph! In the atmosphere of surprise, only Mu Yi's face was extremely gloomy. Being surpassed by Zhong Lixiao in this way made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Another Jew, Xian Emperor ancestor. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly. Even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that these characters from the 8th heaven were all overlords on the Emperor's Road. They were so powerful that they could suppress most of the same realm. In fact, those who could become Zhu Xian Emperor ancestor were indeed peerless geniuses, 1 in 10,000, and extremely abnormal. Even if it was Mu Yi, it was sufficient to make those senior ancestor realm figures feel ashamed of their inferiority and have no choice but to lower their heads. This was the power of the Zhu Tian ancestor. Success. When they saw Zhong Lixiao's figure appear on the peak of the mountain, the surroundings seethed with excitement, and all the cultivators had various expressions on their faces. When compared to Zhong Lixiao, they couldn't help but feel dejected and defeated. Such a heaven-defying figure is really too formidable. Even Lin Sun was surprised. Zhong Lixiao seemed to be a wild, unruly, and frivolous person, but it was obviously just a facade, and he truly possessed a terrifying strength that far surpassed all others. At this moment, he also noticed that Mu Yi's hands had uncontrollably clenched into fists, his expression faintly sinister. Obviously, Zhong Lixiao's ascension to the top was quite a huge blow to him. Qi Lingyun spoke with a calm tone. Looks like Zhong Lixiao has become a formidable opponent in the bet. To her, Zhong Lixiao had ascended to the top, but he still wasn't the only heaven's chosen one. She could only wait for the battle to end and see how many people could ascend to the top. Only then would she be able to ascend to the top based on their own abilities. The time it took to ascend to the top would determine the winner. The peak of this mountain overlooks the world. It's worthy of being the central immortal court. Everyone, I'm looking forward to seeing who can stand shoulder to shoulder with me. Ha ha! On the peak of the mountain, Zhong Lixiao, who wore a pair of fiery red wings and looked like a young man, let out a hearty laugh that resounded through the clouds. Everyone couldn't help but reveal a complicated expression. What are you so proud of? As he spoke, Qi Pajuan strode towards the heaven's chosen path. At least half of the cultivators here hadn't participated in the trial, and they could only retreat and wait when they saw this. A quarter of an hour later, Qi Pajuan ascended to the top in a domineering manner, causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. The smile on Zhong Lixiao's face instantly vanished, and Mu Yi's expression became even more unsightly as he stood on the plateau and witnessed all of this. These two ascended to the top at almost the same time. Do you have the confidence to surpass them? Qi Lingyun looked at Lin Feng, who stood beside her. Lin Feng's slightly mediocre face was emotionless as he said, I'll do my best. Qi Lingyun nodded. Don't force yourself. It's just losing a piece of immortal gold essence. I can afford it. Lin Feng grunted and directly started moving. In next to no time, everyone present was shocked. Lin Feng's speed couldn't be said to be too fast, but it gave others the feeling that he was extremely steady and unstoppable. He really isn't simple. Lin Sun noticed all of this and couldn't help but be surprised. Lin Feng, the imperial ancestor from the fifth heaven, was even stronger than Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pajuan on the heaven's chosen path. If nothing unexpected happened, Lin Feng probably wouldn't be eliminated. Sure enough, under the gazes of everyone, Lin Feng's figure appeared step by step on the peak of the mountain. Good. Qi Lingyun's eyes were suffused with a smile, and she was in high spirits. She'd calculated with her fingers and found that Lin Feng's speed was even faster than Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pajuan, so the time he spent was naturally shorter. At this point, Qi Lingyun had already won this bet. On the peak of the mountain, a wisp of gloominess appeared between the brows of Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pajuan, and the joy and excitement they felt when they ascended the peak had vanished. What they couldn't accept the most was the fact that Lin Feng was only a revered elder of Qi Lingyun's side, yet he was now superior to them. Even if the gap was extremely small, it was still a gap after all. As for Mu Yi, his handsome face was livid at this moment, and he looked like he wanted to find a hole to hide in. It was fine if he was surpassed by Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pajuan, but now he was surpassed by Qi Lingyun's protector. This was like an invisible slap on his face. At present, there were already 3 strong people who had ascended the peak, and this seemed to give many people confidence and hope. In the following time, there were people who continuously went to the trial, but the result was cruel and cold, and almost all of them were eliminated without exception. Among them, when he saw Tsang Fuxing also stopped at a distance of more than 2,600 meters, Lin Sun's calm heart sighed slightly. After all, Tsang Fuxing was only at the peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor realm, and he couldn't be compared with the imperial ancestor. But to Lin Sun's surprise, the saber-bearer, wearing a bamboo hat and carrying a saber on his back, actually ascended the peak in one go. Although his speed was far inferior to Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pejuan, and Lin Feng, his performance still caused an uproar. Only now did people recognize that the saber-bearer was actually not the peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor on the wanted list, but an existence at the peak of the imperial ancestor realm. Many seniors of the immortal emperor clans had already decided to wait for the ruins of the gods to fall. They did everything they could to rope in the saber-bearer. Time passed bit by bit, and more cultivators went up, but no one ascended the peak. Some lamented, some were unwilling, and some were despondent. The blow of being eliminated was too great after all. Lin Sun noticed that Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xieyun were eliminated one after another, but they were rather calm and didn't lose control of their emotions. Obviously, they'd expected that the hope of ascending the peak with their own strength was very slim, so they didn't feel very unwilling. Qi Lingyun looked at Lin Sun. Now you're the only one left who hasn't gone to the trial. Could it be that you intend to give up? The others looked over as well. Previously, everyone had noticed that Lin Sun had already planned to go to the trial, but Zhong Li Xiao and Qi Pejuan had beaten him to it. But in the following period of time, Lin Sun didn't take any action, which made people feel strange. Could it be that he knew that his strength wasn't enough and decided to give up? Lin Sun smiled and glanced at Qi Lingyun. Are you not human? Everyone was startled at first, but soon understood the meaning behind his words, and their expressions became strange. Qi Lingyun indeed didn't go to the trial, but who didn't know that Lin Feng's ascension to the peak meant that she didn't need to go to the trial? Qi Lingyun's expression was obviously sluggish, and she also realized that there was something wrong with her words. She couldn't help but say coldly, I'd like to see how you'll be eliminated. Lin Sun ignored her and walked forward. In fact, everyone present couldn't help but be curious. Although Vicious Lin was a peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor realm, he could kill an Emperor Ancestor realm existence in a head-on battle, which was completely incomparable to those in the same realm. Could he reach the peak? There was hope, but it was very slim. This was what everyone knew. After all, the 4 people standing at the peak of the mountain were all Zhu Xian Emperor ancestors. They were existences more terrifying than one Dao ancestor. And in the eternal world, they were legendary figures that were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. At least in the top 6 heavens, it was almost impossible to see Zhu Xian Emperor ancestors. Even in the 7th heaven, there were only a handful of them, and they were extremely rare. If it wasn't for the amazing fortune in the God's Relic, it would be impossible to see so many Zhu Xian Emperor ancestors gathered together. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Sun stepped onto the path of the Chosen One. Then, an incredible scene happened. Lin Sun's figure was like a dazzling light, and he appeared at a speed of 10,000 feet. From start to finish, it only took a blink of an eye. Everyone had an expression as if they had seen a ghost. What was going on? Qi Lingyun was stunned, and her jade-like hand holding the scroll couldn't help but clench. This abnormal scene caught her off guard, and she was shocked. But before everyone could recover from their shock, they saw Lin Sun's figure continue to fly forward, like an exiled immortal flying on the mountain road, his sleeves fluttering in the wind, and he looked very elegant. In comparison, Zhong Li Xiao and the others who had reached the 10,000 feet mark before looked as clumsy as snails. On the mountain peak, Zhong Li Xiao and the others couldn't help but be dumbfounded, and they almost thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Wasn't this too fierce? In the end, everyone was completely dumbfounded, and they stood there in shock. Because up to the 20,000 feet mark, Lin Sun's speed didn't show any signs of slowing down, and he was still flying forward, extremely cool and unrestrained. P.S. I'm sending more updates. Chapter 2640. At this moment, everyone had an illusion that the path Lin Sun was walking on was completely different from the path they had taken before. Otherwise, how could Lin Sun walk so easily, so contentedly, and so freely? It should be known that the path of Heaven's Chosen contained the battle marks of many supreme experts from the previous era. Every supreme expert had experienced slaughter in the battle of Heaven's Chosen that occurred once every 100,000 years, and in the end, They were the one and only heaven's chosen. This meant that if one wanted to arrive at the peak of the mountain, then it was like returning to the last era, and one had to defeat numerous supreme experts in the annals of time. It was extremely difficult. Otherwise, Zhongli Xiao and the other 3 great ancestors wouldn't have been the only ones to reach the peak. Even Muyi and the other Juetian emperor ancestors had failed at the last step. In comparison, Lin Sun's performance on the Chosen One's path could be described as shocking or even abnormal. Too fast, too graceful, and too relaxed, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard, riding the wind. Who could accept this? This is impossible. He is a peak 8th level emperor. How can he be stronger than a peak emperor ancestor? Muyi was the first to be unable to accept it. He had suffered more than one blow, starting from Zhongli Xiao until now. Every blow dealt a heavy blow to his dignity. But Zhongli Xiao and the others were all Juetian emperor ancestors, so it was barely acceptable. But now, Lin Sun, a peak 8th level emperor, had the momentum to reach the summit. This made Muyi furious, and he felt a great disparity and imbalance. Why? Qilingyun spoke up as well. Her eyes were filled with determination. I don't believe that he's capable of doing this with his strength. There must be something else behind this. There must be a reason for something abnormal. In her opinion, everything that happened to Lin Sun was too abnormal, completely beyond everyone's imagination. Do you think so too? Muyi was excited, as if he had found a confidant. Everyone present was silent, unable to calm down. Of course, they did not want to believe it. But this was the battle of the Chosen One, covered with the supreme power of rules left by the Central Immortal Court. No matter how abnormal it was, it could not change the fact that Lin Sun was about to reach the summit. At this time, if he tried to use other reasons to prove that Lin Sun couldn't do it by his own strength, it would be a little inappropriate. In the eyes of the crowd, Mu Yi and Qilingyun had clearly lost their composure. Lu Xianque and Xiang Xiaoyuan looked at each other and saw a trace of disdain flash in each other's eyes. Obviously, they looked down on Mu Yi and Qilingyun's current performance. Right at this moment, the crowd was stirred and seething with excitement, because Lin Sun had easily appeared on the top of the mountain like an immortal. It seems to be less than 30 breaths. Someone was trembling. This is unbelievable. How did Vicious Lin do it? All the people in the field were shocked by Lin Sun's achievements at the moment. This is definitely another problem. Mu Yi gritted his teeth, his face ashen. Qilingyun had already recovered her calm. She'd realized that she'd lost her composure earlier, but when she saw Lin Sun ascend the peak so easily, her fair and jade-like hands that held the scroll couldn't help but clench tightly. "Uncle, did you think that something like this would happen?" Xiang Xiaoyuan's eyes were wandering. "Break the skull." "I didn't." Lu Xianque sighed with emotion while his heart roiled without end. The more he came into contact with Lin Sun, the more he noticed that this young man from the ancient path of the starry sky was truly too unexpected, and it seemed as if there was nothing in this world that he couldn't accomplish. "This era is one chosen by the heavens," Xiang Xiaoyuan suddenly laughed soundlessly. Conversely, she felt that all of this was normal, because that person's name was Lin Sun. Mist arose on the peak of the mountain, and the grand, lofty, and boundlessly brilliant Central Immortal Court was nearby. It was like the residence of the gods. However, when he arrived here, Lin Sun immediately sensed that his strength had been suppressed once more, and he stood on the spot and was utterly unable to move. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun finally understood why Zhongli Xiao and the others hadn't headed to the Central Immortal Court at the first possible moment. They obviously couldn't be considered as the chosen by the heavens. "You." At this moment, Zhongli Xiao's expression was extremely gloomy, and he seemed as if he had a chest full of words, yet was unable to speak them. Qi Pejuan had a gloomy expression as well, and he seemed as if he'd eaten a fly. Lin Feng remained silent as usual, but when he looked at Lin Sun, there was an irrepressible surprise and a trace of coldness in his eyes. As for the man with the blade, although his expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the bamboo hat on his head, it was impossible for him to remain calm in his heart. Obviously, it was also a big blow to those who had already reached the top of the mountain for Lin Sun to arrive at the peak so quickly and easily. "What's wrong with me?" Lin Sun couldn't help but ask out of goodwill. He was worried that Zhong Lixiao would get sick if he held it in for too long. Zhong Lixiao seemed to be venting his inner emotions as he said word by word, "You, cheater, cheater." His voice resounded through the 9 heavens. Everyone present was stunned. Many people were trying hard to hold back their laughter, and the corners of their lips twitched fiercely. Such an absurd reason actually came from the mouth of Zhong Lixiao, a peerless ancestor of the great emperor. The contrast was too great. Qi Pejuan and Lin Feng couldn't help but turn their heads, and they were obviously shocked by Zhong Lixiao's exasperated words. Lin Sun was startled for a moment, and secretly gave Zhong Lixiao a thumbs up in his heart. This guy really had sharp eyes. In fact, Lin Sun was also in a very complicated mood at the moment. At the moment when he set foot on the Chosen One's way, he felt something unusual because the jade disc of fate, which had been silent for a long time, produced a strange fluctuation like an invisible ripple at this moment. Every time a fighting brand left by a supreme powerhouse of the last era appeared, it would be collected by the power of the jade disc of fate before he could take action. Like plucking fruits, it plucked as it went. The battle imprints of supreme experts were harvested by the good fortune jade disc one after the other. There was no chance for him to take action at all. Lin Sun had no choice. He had already decided to have a try with his own cultivation to see how strong the fighting power of the Chosen Ones were. But he never thought that, however, the good fortune jade disc had helped him commit a huge fraud without anyone noticing. The jade disc of fate was really a fool of people, although he felt a little strange in his heart. The feeling of climbing up and reaching the top with ease really made Lin Sun feel very good. At this moment, the jade disc of fate had already returned to silence, like a beast that had fallen into a deep sleep after eating its fill. The fighting brands of the supreme powerhouses, the complete order of immortals, and the inheritance of the Book of Origin had become a part of it. Lin Sun vaguely remembered that in the Tai ruins, there seemed to be a silent spirit of order in the jade disc of fate. But as soon as it appeared, it turned into a rain of light and dissipated, returning to silence. At that time, he suspected that the spirit of order in the jade disc of fate was very likely to be the spirit of order in the immortal world of the last era. Yet now, along with the collection of the Origin Tao scripture and the battle brands of the supreme experts of the last era, Lin Sun had a stronger feeling that it was very likely that there really was a spirit of order within the jade disc of creation, and it was just that it had always been in silence. Lin Sun, you must have used some methods similar to cheating. Otherwise, even if you have the power to suppress the Emperor Ancestor, it would be impossible for you to leave so easily. Zhong Lixiao also realized that he had lost his composure. His face was very pale, but at least he regained his composure. This judgment was the same as Qi Lingyun. This was exactly what Qi Pejuan and Lin Feng suspected as well. Lin Sun wouldn't admit it, and he said without batting an eyelid, "Is this the excuse of a loser? Or perhaps you, Zhong Lixiao, are a sore loser?" Zhong Lixiao instantly gritted his teeth and said, "It's fine if you don't admit it. Once we leave this place, I'll naturally test your true combat strength. At that time, the truth will definitely be revealed." Lin Sun smiled and didn't speak any further. Dong! A wave of the sound of a divine drum resounded. On the pillar at the side of the central immortal court, a drum that was coiled with immortal light surged into appearance at the spot where the words "All gods descend by beating the jade drum" were inscribed, and the sound of the drum was coming from it. After that, a strand of immortal light suddenly charged out from within the tightly closed door of the central immortal court. It was crystalline, resplendent, illusory, and ethereal. As soon as it appeared, it enveloped Lin Sun's figure. After that, his figure vanished on the spot. On the other hand, Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, Lin Feng, and the man that carried a blade were carried by a shapeless force, and they floated down onto the plateau. They had indeed reached the peak, but in the end, they didn't get any reward. This caused Zhong Li Xiao and the others' hearts to rise and fall, and they gave birth to a sullen feeling that no one else could understand. It was extremely uncomfortable to hold it in. Vicious Lin has actually become the chosen one. On the plateau, a group of cultivators had a complicated expression on their faces. Some were shocked, some were envious, and some were in disbelief. Previously, they all thought that this supreme fortune would be obtained by the nobles of the eighth heaven. But in the end, it was a person that no one had expected to obtain. The ruins of the gods is regarded as the first forbidden area in the vast thousand battles domain, and this fortune can absolutely be regarded as the supreme treasure of the last era. Vicious Lin's combat strength is incomparably heaven-defying. After obtaining this fortune, why worry about not being able to reach the peak and become an ancestor? Why worry about not being able to achieve immortality in the future? Various sighs sounded. Thinking about it, Lin Sun was able to suppress the emperor ancestor, leave his name on the Xian list, and wipe out the experts of the seventh heaven, such as the Nan clan and the Li clan. Now that he had obtained such a supreme fortune, how terrifying would his future achievements be? Obtaining the fortune doesn't mean that he can keep it. Someone said coldly with a gloomy expression. Do you all think that Lin Sun can still leave the vast thousand battles domain alive after obtaining the fortune? This sentence caused many people's eyes to change subtly, and they all had different expressions. Outside the ruins of the gods, there were many immortal figures guarding it. If they knew that this supreme fortune was obtained by Lin Sun, how could they let him leave alive under their noses? Look at the 4 Eastern Emperor clans. Then look at the nobles of the immortal forces. Who would tolerate him leaving with the fortune? Chapter 26:41. There is no need to wait until we leave this place. Don't forget that there is still a convention of the immortal court after the battle for the throne. Zhong Li Xiao said coldly. The convention of the immortal court. In the last era, after the battle of the Chosen One, any cultivator who entered the battle for the throne could challenge the Chosen One in the convention of the immortal court if they were not convinced. If the Chosen One could block all obstacles, he could be regarded as the successor of the central immortal court in the true sense. If he couldn't, the so-called title of Chosen One would be deprived, and the winner would enter the central immortal court and become the successor of the central immortal court. But in the rumors, such a situation rarely happened, because those who could kill their way out of the battle of the Chosen One once in 100,000 years were all supreme existences, and they had the power to be invincible in the same realm. However, Zhong Li Xiao's words reminded everyone present that something that might not have happened in the last era might happen in the current era. The reason was very simple. They had all determined that there was something wrong with Lin Sun's performance on the road of Chosen One, and it was impossible for him to do it with his cultivation. Yes, there is still the convention of the immortal court. All of a sudden, Mu Yi's eyes lit up. He, who had suffered a blow before, seemed to see hope again at this moment. An opportunity to suppress Lin Sun and seize his fortune. At this time, Qi Lingyun also spoke. Her clear eyes were like water, and her voice was tactful. Everyone, I am not interested in the Chosen One, but if you can work together in the convention of the immortal court and take Lin Sun down for me, I don't mind taking you to the eighth heaven for cultivation. The crowd was restless. The more than 300 cultivators almost couldn't believe their ears. They could go to the eighth heaven for cultivation just by helping to deal with Lin Sun. Lu Xiangque and Xiang Xiaoyuan's expressions changed at the same time, and they felt a chill in their hearts. Qi Lingyun was so ruthless that she wanted to tie everyone together to deal with Lin Sun. I can also agree to this, Qi Pejuan said. Zhong Li Xiao said, count me in. How could they not understand that Qi Lingyun's move was absolutely killing 2 birds with 1 stone? She not only mobilized all forces to deal with Lin Sun, but also collected a group of rare talents for herself. After all of these cultivators here were top-rate figures who'd experienced the selection of the arena and the grand hunt, and they'd fought their way out of almost 30,000 emperors. No matter which one it was, all of them could be considered to be overlords at the same cultivation realm. If he was able to take them under his command, then the benefits he would obtain would probably be sufficient to move the hearts of even those eternal realm overlords. Imperial ancestor Ju Lai was an existence that even the undying emperors of the eighth heaven valued, and were willing to pay a huge price to recruit. Of course, I won't force you guys. If anyone is willing, you can join us when the Immortal Court assembly begins. Qi Lingyun said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, many people secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, it's tempting to go to the eighth heaven to cultivate, but the risk is also great. Among those present, the Gu clan and the Yun clan were the ones with the most uneasy expressions. Qi Lingyun's intervention would undoubtedly disrupt their plan to capture Lin Sun. If they missed this opportunity, how could they explain to Donghuang clan in the future? Qi Lingyun and the others might be after the fortune of the Central Immortal Court. But what the four clans of the Eastern Emperor were after was not this. Don't be impatient. Don't forget that the eternal realm figures of our four clans are waiting outside the God's Relic. At that time, if Lin Sun dies, let those eternal realm figures come forward and ask Qi Lingyun and the others for the fortune related to Nirvana. Gu Banzwang's voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzzing, and she stood far away from the cliff platform to comfort everyone. Her cultivation was suppressed, so she couldn't transmit her voice. Everyone's perception was also weakened, so she didn't need to worry about others hearing what she said. That's the only way. Yun Luohong also nodded. Speaking of this matter, whether it was him, Gu Banzwang, or others, they all felt extremely depressed. How could all the good things in this world be monopolized by Lin Sun? The Nirvana fortune that the Donghuang clan was determined to get was with him, and the supreme treasure of the Central Immortal Court was also obtained by him. So now, whether it was Qi Lingyun and the other nobles of the Eighth Heaven, or the four clans of the Eastern Emperor, it was very likely that there would be friction because of competing for the fortune. This really made people speechless. Wait and see. The Immortal Court meeting will start in a month at the latest. At that time, that Lin Sun must spit out whatever he ate. Zhong Lixiao's eyes were very cold. Originally, he appreciated Lin Sun very much and wanted to guide him to the eighth heaven to cultivate. But what Lin Sun had done before made him completely furious. Don't forget about the bet. You all have to help persuade Lin Sun to bow down to me. Not far away, Qi Lingyun reminded with a smile. At the mention of the bet, Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pajuan, and Mu Yi's faces were gloomy. White, immortal mist filled the air, and the ground paved with black divine jade under their feet had already cracked, with many mottled cracks. Collapsed stone pillars were lying on the ground, and patterns of flowers, birds, insects, fish, and mountains and rivers could be faintly seen on the stone pillars. Further away, there were broken bricks scattered on the ground, each of which was extremely huge. In front of the stone pillars, there should be the central altar of a palace in the past, but it had also collapsed into a pile of broken stones. In the past, this place was a towering and magnificent immortal palace, representing the supreme authority and majesty of the immortal world. But now it was full of desolation, and the ground was in a mess, like an abandoned ruin. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. This was completely different from the scene he expected. This is the Central Immortal Court, the most supreme place of this era. Lin Sun realized that even though the ruins of the gods were well preserved, the Central Immortal Court was probably severely destroyed in the great calamity of the end of this era. He began to walk here, and it was like walking on a silent ruin of eternity, giving people a sense of desolation and withering. The glory of the past seemed to have long been destroyed in this era, and the wind and rain blew away, leaving only desolation. Lin Sun, who was sighing with emotion in his heart, suddenly noticed a wisp of spirit light. When he looked carefully, that wisp of spirit light flashed from the depths of a pile of rubble. He walked forward and moved the rubble away with a wave of his sleeve. Only then did he see clearly that the wisp of spirit light was a tender green sprout that took root in the ruins, and it was verdant and showed a tenacious vitality. Lin Sun's heart trembled inexplicably. Is it reborn from destruction? This sprout was too weak, but it just so happened to give Lin Sun an extremely tenacious aura. It seemed that even if the era was destroyed and the immortal court declined, it would be unable to stop its growth. And it had become the only vitality in this abandoned immortal court. Lin Sun stared at it and noticed that this was a sapling of a tree that had just sprouted. The tender leaf was filled with an indescribable and mysterious aura, and it gave people the feeling that it wasn't a tiny tender leaf, but a vast and boundless world of the Grand Tao that carried the origin energy of the immortal Tao era. Could the rumors be true? Lin Sun recalled some rumors he'd heard before coming to the ruins of the gods. In the last era, the supreme treasure that belonged to the central immortal court was a primordial myriad Tao tree, and it was known as the root of the immortal world. It was said that this tree would condense an unfathomable Tao fruit every 100,000 years. This fruit was born with the destiny of the immortal Tao, and if one swallowed and refined it, one would obtain the inconceivable fortune of the Grand Tao. Some people directly ascended into immortal form after consuming the Tao fruit, transforming into gods. Some people established an indestructible and immortal Tao, comprehending the profundities of great freedom, and great transcendence. Some people controlled the supreme Tao. In short, the Tao fruit condensed by the primordial myriad Tao tree gave different fortunes to everyone, and it could be said to be mysterious and unfathomable. And this primordial myriad Tao tree was also regarded as the supreme treasure of the central immortal court. It was believed by the cultivators of the world that this tree was the root of the immortal Tao world, the origin of the profundities of all Taos. Originally, Lin Sun had scoffed at this rumor, but now he was somewhat uneasy. The entire central immortal court had long been reduced to ruins. If there was a supreme treasure hidden here, then it would definitely be this sapling before him. Its aura was too mysterious. It was only the size of a fingernail, but it seemed to carry the origin power of the entire immortal Tao. However, if it was the primordial myriad Tao tree, it was at most a small sapling of the primordial myriad Tao tree. This fortune related to the supreme treasure is really unique. Lin Sun stroked his chin, and he was somewhat at a loss as to where to start. He was worried that the sapling would be broken if he accidentally touched it, and if he wanted to take away the entire sapling, he was worried that it would wither and wither. After pondering for a moment, Lin Sun suddenly thought of something and took out the creation jade disc. Immediately, a miraculous scene occurred. The green sapling actually trembled slightly, as if it was extremely excited, and it emitted strands of illusory and tiny green light. However, the creation jade disc was indifferent, and it was far from being as lively as when it had collected the Origin Tao book and those battle brands. Lin Sun took a deep breath, held the creation jade disc, and gently placed it beside the sapling. The sapling stretched out a soft branch that was as thin as an ox's hair and surged into the creation jade disc, as if it was absorbing something. Lin Sun's eyes lit up. It was indeed useful. A guess in his heart had been verified. Subsequently, the tender shoot broke through the ground like rain after a long drought. It took root and sprouted, and it swayed and grew within the ruins. In a short period of a few breaths of time, it grew into a palm-sized sapling. Its stem was crystalline and translucent, and it was branded with markings that were mysterious and chaotic. On its stem, tender green and soft branches extended out, covering the entire creation jade disc. At this moment, Lin Sun finally saw clearly that the power absorbed by the primordial myriad Tao tree was shockingly the battle brands collected by the creation jade disc on the road of Heaven's Chosen. That was the battle power left behind by every chosen one of the previous era. But now, these battle powers were like nourishment, being constantly absorbed by the sapling of the primordial myriad Tao tree, and the sapling grew stronger and stronger. In just a quarter of an hour, it had grown to a foot tall. Its stem was like the clearest jade in the world, and its branches were like green, immortal gold. It was brilliant and dreamy like a rain of light. P.S. I'll continue to update tonight. A few places have been squeezed out of the monthly vote rankings. Brothers and sisters, please vote for me. Chapter 2642. The deathly silent ruins were tainted with a divine aura, and the jade-green light was filled with an indescribably supreme aura. Lin Sun's heart trembled, as if he was witnessing the birth of a miracle. Crack! The ruins near the primordial Tao tree split apart as countless fine and crystalline roots surged out, and its stem grew taller and thicker without end. The origin aura of the immortal Tao started to suffuse the air, and it was dense like rain. Lin Sun calmed his heart and sensed it, and he finally faintly understood that all those supreme experts had once entered the central immortal court when they were alive, and they'd all swallowed and refined the Tao fruits condensed from the primordial Tao tree. The energy of combat they'd left behind naturally contained the aura of the primordial Tao tree's energy. Now, the energy of combat was being fed back to the sapling of the primordial Tao tree, and it caused the tree to undergo an unbelievable transformation. Later on, Lin Sun noticed to his shock that the primordial Tao tree wasn't satisfied after absorbing all the energy of combat, and it started to absorb the energy of the Origin Tao scripture instead. The Origin Tao scripture is a compilation of the supreme inheritances of the immortal Tao, and it's said to be the origin of the immortal Tao. Could this energy be related to the primordial Tao tree? Before Lin Sun could figure out, 33 branches appeared on the primordial Tao tree that had grown to a height of 33 meters. 33 meters represented the height of the tree. 33 faintly contained the intent to contain the heavens. After absorbing the energy of the Origin Tao scripture, leaves started to grow on the 33 branches, and they revealed a perfect, flawless, and pure aura. The veins on every leaf were different, yet they seemed to follow the natural trajectory of the Grand Tao, and they emanated a completely different aura of the Grand Tao. Lin Sun determined with a single glance that there were a total of 3,000 leaves that had condensed. 933, 3,000. Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. The meaning that every single one of these numbers represented was too extraordinary. 9 was the extreme number. 33 represented the vastness of the heavens. 3,000 represented the boundless number of the Grand Tao. It was only a primordial Tao tree, yet it was filled with profundities in Lin Sun's eyes. Just as Lin Sun's eyes drifted, the transformation of the primordial Tao tree quietly ended. When she looked over once more, he saw that above the ruins was an azure glow that flowed like a waterfall, resplendent immortal radiance, and seething Tao radiance. A 27 tall primordial mist tree that seemed as if it was constructed from chaotic immortal gold had 33 branches that stretched out and enveloped the entire tree. The entire tree was verdant and swayed with the glow of wisdom. Every single day, its leaves emanated a completely different and profound aura of the Tao. When one stood before it, it was like one was within an immortal realm. Their body, heart, and soul were bathed in a tranquil and peaceful aura of the Grand Tao, and they were able to comprehend the origins and profundities of the immortal Tao at the first possible moment. At this moment, Lin Sun had a strong impulse to meditate and ignore the ups and downs of the world, but he still resisted. The primordial myriad Tao tree hadn't condensed a Tao fruit, which made him feel slightly disappointed. Could it be that he had to wait another 100,000 years? Putting away the jade plate of fate, Lin Sun stopped for a moment and made a decision. He cultivated here and perfected his body. He didn't hold much hope towards being able to break through, because to become a martial ancestor required a fortuitous encounter, and that sort of fortuitous encounter was absolutely rare, something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. Right now, Lin Sun only wanted to take this opportunity to completely refine his Grand Tao. The martial ancestor was also known as the ancestor of a Tao, and those who became a martial ancestor at the peak could be called the martial ancestor. But Lin Sun wasn't willing to stop there. If he wanted to pursue a path that had never existed since ancient times, then he should prove that there was no Tao in the world. His Tao contained all the Taos in the world and all the laws in the world. Since that was the case, he should naturally seek the Tao of the martial ancestor. In fact, at this stage, the biggest problem wasn't the improvement of the realm. What he had to consider was how high his Tao could reach. This was because almost everyone would be stopped at the barrier of the martial ancestor. As long as there was enough time, a small realm could be cultivated, so it wasn't a problem. And anyone who wanted to dominate the Emperor's path would focus on the issue of combat strength. How could they become the strongest in the same realm? This was the most important thing. After all, the martial ancestor realm was the end of the Emperor's path. If one could be invincible in this realm, then it would be the only peak on the Emperor's path, able to suppress the ages and look down on the Emperor's path. It was unparalleled. Lin Sun sat cross-legged under the primordial Tao tree like a statue of a god, dignified, and he immediately fell into a wondrous and indescribable state of cultivation. Dreamlike green light drifted down from the primordial Tao tree and bathed his entire body in it. His entire body was soaked in the aura of the immortal Tao. This made him feel as if he'd fallen into the origin of the immortal Tao, and his understanding and comprehension of the Grand Tao had reached a shocking level. He didn't even need to waste time to figure it out, and he could directly peek into the original essence of the immortal Tao, comprehend it in his heart, and contain it in his body. This was incredible. It was no different from the rumored, once you comprehend the Tao, you will be enlightened, and this naturally belonged to the power of the primordial Tao tree. It was the root of the immortal world, and it converged the origin of the immortal Tao. It was the supreme treasure of the central immortal court, and it was the greatest fortune of the last era. So it was naturally extraordinary. In fact, while he was comprehending and meditating here, Lin Sun had already experienced its profundities, and it had practically completely overturned his understanding. Time flowed by. Later on, Lin Sun's entire aura formed a perfect fit with the primordial Tao tree, and it seemed as if the primordial Tao tree had already transformed into a part of the aura in his body. Later on, various unimaginable phenomena of the Grand Tao started to surge around his body. Wind and thunder shook the ears, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, and it seemed as if the heavens and the earth were being split apart. The aura was so terrifying that it seemed as if it could make all the Taos in the world bow beneath its feet. His vital energy and blood boiled, and he emanated an indescribable aura. His figure transformed into a furnace at times, and then into an abyss at times. During this period of time, the various profundities of the Grand Tao that he'd fused into his body surged and appeared without end, and they transformed into the universe, the stars, the landscape, the birds, the beasts, the lightning, the earth, and the fire. Lin Sun transformed the various Grand Tao from what he'd learned in the past to what he'd comprehended now, and he deduced them ceaselessly. In the end, his entire body seemed to have vanished, and there was only a large abyss that floated up and down. It completely swallowed the universe, mountains, rivers, geography, and everything that had been formed. He was boundlessly domineering, and his entire body carried an insane aura. He seemed as if he intended to sweep through the 3,000 worlds and swallow the world. In the end, the aura around Lin Sun's body calmed down and quieted down. Only his body and mind were enshrouded by the Grand Tao, and it was like the tranquil ocean, condensed and magnificent. Later on, various laws of the immortal Tao emerged around his body, and they flowed brilliantly as the profundities of the immortal Tao of the last era appeared one by one. It was a completely different scene of the Grand Tao. From the Violet Mansion to the Golden Palace, from entering the Golden Core to embracing Nirvana, and it radiated the unique primitive Tao of the immortal Tao. Lin Sun was completely unaware of the passage of time. In fact, he'd already forgotten himself at this moment, and his body and mind were in harmony with the Tao. After an unknown period of time, his figure transformed into an abyss once more, and half of the Grand Tao he derived belonged to the Tao he'd controlled in the past, and it was the extreme Tao of this era. The other half belonged to the immortal Tao of the last era. This was like the profundities of the Grand Tao of two eras had appeared on him alone, and it was ceaselessly being deduced and transformed. The energy of the Grand Tao became more and more complicated, more and more obscure, and more indescribable. On the other hand, Lin Sun's body carried a type of exuberant aura, and it carried a form of unfathomability that was like an abyss. No one knew that at this moment, he was carrying out an unprecedented fusion of the complete profundities of the immortal Tao with his own Grand Tao. To the cultivators of this era, even if they were able to comprehend and grasp the Grand Tao of the last era, it was only a portion of it, and it was utterly impossible for it to be complete. But to Lin Sun, he possessed the nether-held Tao and immortal Tao of the last era. Both of them were complete systems of Grand Taos, and they contained the most primitive and essential profundities. This meant that he'd succeeded in fusing the Tao this time, and he possessed the energy of the Grand Tao of two eras. If it was in the past, then Lin Sun was bound to not be able to accomplish this in a short period of time. But it was different now. Under the primordial Tao tree, it allowed him to easily comprehend and grasp the profundities of the Grand Tao of the last era, and it gave him a superb opportunity to fuse the Tao. The primordial Tao tree swayed while its crystalline and translucent green leaves flickered brilliantly, and it sprinkled down a rain of light that was extremely peaceful. In the last era, exactly how many exalts of the immortal Tao had stood beneath this tree and deduced their own techniques and Tao? Now, Lin Sun was comprehending the Tao beneath this tree as well. In the end, Lin Sun was like a celestial emperor that had descended to the mortal world. Every single breath he took resonated with the various Grand Taos, and it was like the sound of chanting that rumbled and shook the world. On the other hand, the imposing aura on his body grew stronger and stronger like a volcano that would erupt at any moment, and every inch of his skin surged with peerless energy of the Grand Tao. Early on, when he was in Chaotian City, Lin Sun's cultivation had already attained the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor Realm, and at this moment, as he ceaselessly comprehended the Grand Tao, his cultivation actually felt restless. But at this moment, Lin Sun didn't have the mood to care about this at all. If he could integrate all the Taos of the last era into his body, then when he proved his Tao, he was destined to display a power that was different from this era. This was what Lin Sun cared about. Time passed day by day. Under the primordial Tao tree, Lin Sun's body couldn't be seen at all. It was completely submerged by the vast energy of the Grand Tao that was like a rain of light. The translucent green leaves on the tree swayed like a scripture, and rays of light fell down, making Lin Sun even more hazy. Until half a month later, the place where Lin Sun's figure was located produced an indescribable sonorous sound of the Grand Tao. All the energy of the Grand Tao seemed to be drawn together and condensed. Gradually, the embryonic form of a furnace appeared, and it was constantly perfected and refined. In the end, the primordial Tao tree trembled violently. Lin Sun's figure was like a great abyss, swallowing all the surging Grand Tao nearby and merging it into the furnace. Then, it disappeared into Lin Sun's body. All the strange phenomena disappeared. All the light of the Grand Tao was silent. Only Lin Sun's figure, sitting cross-legged, seemed to exist forever. P.S. Added and sent. Chapter 2643. The leaves of the primordial myriad Tao tree flipped and rustled like pages of ancient scriptures being unfolded, emitting the sonorous voice of the great Tao that sounded like chanting. It was as if he was describing the beginning of the universe and the process of the birth of the world. There was only a single figure beneath the tree, quietly sitting cross-legged like a boulder. From start to finish, he didn't move at all, yet he seemed to possess the aura of an eternal existence. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to have completely fused the immortal path and netherworld path of the last era with his own cultivation, and he'd cultivated them together to transcend the present world and be unparalleled throughout the ages. Soundlessly, an obscure and inexplicable aura of calamity emerged. Under the Hongmeng tree, Lin Sun opened his eyes quietly. His expression was tranquil, like an ancient well, while his black eyes were clear and ethereal. He stood up and stretched the tendons and bones in his body, and then he started to display the various techniques he possessed. It was as if he didn't realize that an unprecedented calamity was brewing and would fall at any moment. Merging all Taos, developing all techniques at this moment. At this time, Lin Sun's mind was still immersed in the wonderful state of Tao enlightenment. As he ran his Tao, all kinds of Tao appeared. Sword scripture, fist scripture, palm print, finger method. Different Tao, all showed different powers. At this moment, tens of thousands of strands of the Tao interweaved together and transformed into all sorts of unbelievable scenes. It was like numerous immortals were practicing, and they were either overbearing, peerless, unrestrained like the wind. The gods were howling, the devils were roaring, and the 3,000 leaves of the primordial tree emitted the aura of countless supreme techniques of the immortal Tao that developed into a boundlessly terrifying scene. It seemed as if countless supreme gods were deducing the Tao arts they each possessed, and every single one of them possessed a great, imposing aura that could suppress the past, present, and future. The most powerful Taoism, the most powerful inheritance, and the flowing scriptures were all reflected in Lin Sun's body. He was like a heavenly emperor. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled with every raise of his hand, and the heavens exploded. It was as if everything was going to be destroyed. Every single movement he made was the extreme of the Tao, possessing matchless divine force. The primordial Tao tree had 3,000 green leaves, which represented the endless inheritance of the immortal Tao. At this moment, they resonated with Lin Sun's Tao. At the same time, on the plateau below the central immortal court, 20 days had passed. Qi Lingyun, Zhongli Xiao, and the other cultivators have been waiting all this time, and they seem to be very patient. This little bit of time was nothing to existences like them. After all, some Emperor Ancestor Realm existences could easily go into seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. However, right at this moment, a terrifying aura of calamity effused out, and it caused their hearts to shake and swiftly raise their heads. A wisp of a pitch-black tribulation cloud that was pitch black like ink had suddenly appeared in the sky, and an oppressive aura that seemed capable of obliterating the world swept out along with it. The aura was so terrifying that even the imperial ancestors couldn't help but turn pale, and their hearts trembled. What kind of calamity is this? How terrifying! Everyone present here was experienced and knowledgeable. Since they'd started cultivating until now, they'd experienced the ups and downs of the world, and they'd become accustomed to seeing all sorts of phenomena in the world. But at this moment, all of them were surprised and bewildered, and they revealed expressions of disbelief. Because the aura of such a calamity was absolutely something they'd never heard of or seen before. This shouldn't be Lin Sun's ancestor realm tribulation, right? At this moment, even Zhongli Xiao was unable to maintain his calm, and his pupils constricted while they were filled with bewilderment. The extinction ancestor tribulation, an unprecedented extinction ancestor tribulation. Qi Lingyun's eyes revealed a rare expression of shock as well, and she'd lost her composure at this moment. How could this be possible? He was astounded. Even the aura of the tribulation I experienced when I became an ancestral ancestor wasn't so terrifying. Qi Pujuan's expression wavered indeterminately as well. All of them were from the 8th heaven, and they were imperial ancestors of the Juxian heaven. So they were far more clearly aware of how terrifying and abnormal it was to become an ancestral ancestor. Merely for the sake of obtaining a strand of an opportunity to attain the Tao, it was capable of trapping numerous extraordinary figures. Moreover, the great calamity one faced when one truly attained the Tao was formidable to the point of practically causing one to despair. For example, all of them had exhausted all their efforts and utilized the strength of their entire clans in order to obtain this strand of opportunity to attain the Tao with great difficulty. Moreover, when they transcended the tribulation, they even had the protection of their ancestors, countless peerless treasures to protect themselves, and spirit pills that could be called precious treasures of the heavens and the earth to prolong their lives. It could be said that they mobilized the power of their entire clan and made full preparations to finally step into the threshold of the Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor. But even so, as far as they knew, some characters who were as outstanding as them and had the same status as them had fallen in such a great calamity. They were all proud figures cultivated by the immortal giants with countless painstaking efforts. From this, one could see the horror of the tribulation of the Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor. However, compared with the aura of the tribulation in front of them, Qi Ling Yun and the others all found that the ancestral tribulation they had experienced in the past was completely insignificant. This was the reason why they were surprised and lost their composure. Seeing the Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor lose their composure like this, the other cultivators present couldn't remain calm. Did this mean that it was precisely because Lin Sun had a more terrifying and abnormal foundation in this realm that the great calamity triggered at this time was more terrible than what Qi Ling Yun and the others had experienced in the past? After all, it was well known that the more terrible the calamity triggered, the more terrifying the cultivation of the person who was transcending it was. Boom, the sky had turned into the color of the eternal night, completely covered by the dark and oppressive tribulation clouds. There was no light at all. The indescribable aura of destruction caused the world to fall into a terrifying atmosphere. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines while their hearts palpitated. At this moment, the bodies of Qi Ling Yun and the others felt cold as well. They realized that this calamity could absolutely be said to be rare since time immemorial. It had exceeded their understanding as well. Merely this alone caused them to feel extremely uncomfortable. Even if they were unwilling, they had no choice but to admit that they couldn't compare to Lin Sun all those years ago. Otherwise, the difference in the calamity they caused wouldn't be so great. It's simply the luck of the heavens. Lin Sun entered the central Tao court and obtained a supreme treasure. Now, he's even grasped a trace of an opportunity to draw down such a vast calamity. If he attains the Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor realm at the peak, then wouldn't he be able to crush all his peers in the world? Zhong Lixiao's face was gloomy while his chest felt heavy. Under such a great calamity, Lin Sun doesn't have anyone to protect him, nor is he fully prepared. So his chances of survival are bound to be extremely slim, said Qi Pejun coldly. Even if he has a chance to overcome the tribulation successfully, we absolutely can't allow him to succeed. Qi Ling Yun's mellow and indifferent voice revealed a wisp of resolution, and a rare trace of bone-piercing coldness appeared in her eyes. Such a great calamity had never been seen since time immemorial. Once Lin Sun succeeded in overcoming it, who in the same realm could suppress his arrogance? At that time, Zhu Xian would probably be the supreme Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor realm. Such a thing absolutely couldn't be allowed to happen. Everyone, please take a look. After the arrival of this great calamity, the power of rules in this world has begun to show signs of collapse. If I'm not wrong, it won't be long before the power that covers the Chosen One's path will collapse. At that time, we can all head to the central Tao court together. As soon as Qi Ling Yun's words were spoken, everyone present became restless. After careful observation, they noticed that it was as Qi Ling Yun had said, the power of rules in this world had begun to become chaotic. It was even to the extent that the power of rules that suppressed their cultivation showed signs of loosening and disintegrating. That's even better. Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejun, and the others revealed killing intent. Lin Sun's threat was too great. and he'd seized a fortune of this place. If they didn't eliminate him, they wouldn't be able to eat and sleep in peace. Bang! A thunderclap resounded from the depths of the dense black tribulation clouds, and it was simply like the first sound that split the heavens and the earth apart. It resounded through the heavens and the earth, and it shook one to the point one's blood roiled while one saw stars. The supreme might of the heavens was truly too terrifying. After that, a wave of thunderclaps that shook the world resounded, and it seemed like an army of gods had charged out from the depths of the tribulation clouds. A myriad of dazzling and resplendent thunderstorms transformed into a vast ocean, and then numerous mighty figures that seemed like gods charged out from within the ocean. They were bathed in the glow of lightning, and they held the might of the heavens as they charged towards the central Tao court. Merely the sight of this scene caused everyone to feel suffocated, and they almost lost their composure. All of them were astounded. Isn't this great calamity a little too abnormal and terrifying? The more it was like this, the firmer Qi Lingyun was in her heart to annihilate Lin Sun. Earlier, she'd held the thought of subduing Lin Sun and making him submit to her, but now, all of that had been replaced by killing intent. If you die beneath the heavenly tribulation, then it'll be over. If I have the chance to survive, then I'll bury you here forever. Qi Lingyun stared fixedly at the Chosen One's path, and she was waiting for the energy of the rules that covered it to be destroyed. The central Tao court. The primordial Tao tree stood towering while a myriad of strands of brilliant jade green light of the Tao flowed through it, and it wasn't affected by the heavenly tribulation at all. Up until this moment, Lin Sun, who stood beneath it, actually seemed as if he hadn't noticed it at all, and he was deducing the various supreme inheritances and techniques with all his might. Rumble. A group of mighty figures that were formed from the calamity arrived while bathed in lightning. The weapons in their hands were formed from the might of the heavens, and they were boundlessly terrifying. However, before they could even approach, they were blasted apart by a strand of invisible and terrifying might, and they transformed into an explosive rain of lightning that swept towards the surroundings. Dazzling light illuminated the hall that was suffused with a boundless expanse of white mist, and it shone onto Lin Sun, who was practicing. All kinds of supreme inheritances and infinite Tao, under Lin Sun's deduction, turned into the power of landslides and tsunamis, shaking and spreading. On the other hand, all the lightning figures that charged over were obliterated by this might. At this moment, Lin Sun was both developing his techniques and overcoming the heavenly tribulation. However, his mind was immersed in a strange state, and it caused everything to seem very different. The power of the calamity was extremely violent and terrifying. It poured down ceaselessly, and it transformed into a terrifying phenomenon that seemed like the end of the world, and it was aimed at him alone. If it was anyone else, they would have probably collapsed in despair a long time ago. However, Lin Sun was neither fast nor slow, neither arrogant nor rash, and neither sad nor happy. He was immersed in the martial arts practice, and he'd completely forgotten himself as he stretched his body in a leisurely manner. As he raised his hand, he ceaselessly struck out various techniques, and he was deducing and fusing them with all his might. This was like the extreme sublimation of breaking out of a cocoon into a butterfly, and he intended to attain that moment of beauty. P.S. The second one was slightly later. Chapter 26:44. Under the primordial Daos tree, the divine light was boiling. Even if one stood on the cliff below the central immortal court, one could clearly see that in the magnificent immortal palace, numerous gods and demons were roaring between heaven and earth. Infinite Taoist light was soaring in the sky, and thousands of scriptures were resonating and rumbling. Even the surging and violent thunder retribution ocean couldn't cover the sound of the great way that came from that place, which was too grand and boundless. Lin Sun's figure was like the ruler of the heavens, practicing martial arts under the primordial Daos tree. Every time he waved his hand, thousands of scriptures resonated, stars appeared all over the sky, and endless phenomena surged. Boom! A A spear swept through the sky from outer space, and it was entwined with the power of divine punishment. It was like the spear of judgment from the ruler of heaven, and the aura of calamity was even more terrifying than before. Lin Sun's mind was empty, and he completely forgot himself as he fell into enlightenment. But the aura around his body reacted at the first time, and then he punched out. The flames were monstrous, and a vermilion bird screamed and flew out of the blazing fist, burning half of the sky. The spear of divine punishment that came violently like judgment was immediately blocked by this punch. It produced a violent buzz in the void, and then it was shaken to the point of exploding inch by inch, and the splashing rain of lightning swept out like a waterfall. Such a terrifying attack was still weak in front of Lin Sun at this moment. The power of calamity in the depths of the sky seemed to be infuriated, and then there were dazzling divine chains that spread down like divine punishment. There were tens of thousands of them, and they covered the sky and the earth like the whip of chaos that was dancing wildly, lashing the universe. The scene was so terrifying that it made the practitioners on the cliff suffocate and turn pale with horror. Looking from afar, thousands of divine chains were like a cage that descended from the sky, and they intended to restrain, suppress, and destroy the person crossing the tribulation. In the immortal palace, Lin Sun's expression was as calm as before. He shook his fists, plucked the sun with his left hand, and pinched the moon with his right. He was like an ancient god descending, and there was brilliance and matchless divine power everywhere. The unparalleled power swept across and shattered the divine chains, and they fell continuously in the void like a broken dead snake, and a rain of light was like a tide. His aura engulfed an area of 5,000 kilometers, and he executed the supreme Tao arts he'd gathered to the fullest. The dense divine chains were utterly unable to touch his figure before they were swept and crushed by the might he emanated, and it was an extremely shocking scene. This was a grand scene. 1,000 grand Daos and a myriad of Tao arts resounded without end, while clanging sounds resounded without end. The phenomena of various Tao arts appeared in unison and transformed into the most terrifying light in the world. They ceaselessly interweaved and resonated in space, and they faintly showed signs of fusing into one and undergoing an extreme transformation. Rumbling thunder came from his body, and his blood surged like a great river, and it was deafening like the sea. All types of scriptures began to appear on the surface of his body, engraved with mysterious imprints. As he breathed in and out, there was a great might that could sweep through the 9 heavens. Above the sky, a terrifying tribulation that could be said to have never been seen since time immemorial was ceaselessly pouring down a force that seemed like it could destroy the world, and it transformed into various shocking scenes. The cultivators on the plateau, even those as powerful as Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, and the other Jewish and great ancestors were occasionally shocked, and their expressions changed. Because the might of the apocalyptic calamity had clearly become more and more abnormal, more and more terrifying, and had completely exceeded their understanding. Even in the 8th heaven of the eternal world, such a disaster had never appeared before. But no matter how powerful the heavenly disaster became, every single time it descended into the world, Lin Sun would shatter it without him realizing it. He was like a legendary Kuan that had the potential to soar 90,000 lis and the power to swallow the sky. Why isn't he dead yet? Zhong Li Xiao could not remain calm on the plateau. The heavenly disaster was so terrifying that even he was shocked and terrified, but it showed no signs of disappearing. This meant that Lin Sun had not encountered any danger, and he was still fighting against the disaster. Qi Pejuan and the others were also in disbelief. If it was them in the past, the power of the disaster they faced would be far inferior to what they were seeing now. But even so, they had still endured many hardships and been heavily injured. They had even struggled on the edge of life and death many times before they finally succeeded in passing the disaster. But now, Lin Sun's disaster was so powerful, but had not ended yet. Didn't this mean that if Lin Sun succeeded in passing the disaster, his attainments in the progenitor realm would far surpass theirs? Who could accept this? We can't let him live. Chipajuan said word by word. The power of rules here has broken. Let's go. Suddenly, Qi Lingyun spoke, and a terrifying golden light shone in her eyes. At this moment, her elegant bearing that was like an orchid had vanished while her suppressed cultivation had recovered at this moment, and she emanated boundless might. Moreover, her graceful figure was coiled by strands of golden and bright ancestor realm laws, causing her to seem like a celestial or god. She immediately stepped forward, heading towards the heavens' chosen path. Almost at the same time, all the cultivators present noticed that their suppressed cultivation had recovered, and the power of rules in the world had become completely chaotic and shattered. Let's go. Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pajuan, and the others who couldn't restrain themselves since a long time ago shot into the sky with killing intent and emanated terrifying might. They were like gods as they flashed towards the immortal court at the peak of the mountain. Numerous cultivators were participating behind them. Earlier, Qi Lingyun and the others had agreed that so long as they went to deal with Lin's son, they would bring them to the eighth heaven to cultivate. So, at this moment, they didn't hesitate to follow along. "Uncle, what should we do?" Xiang Xiaoyuan asked anxiously via voice transmission. "Our lives are given to us by Lin's son. Now that he's about to suffer calamity, what harm is there in giving our lives back to him?" Lu Xiangxue took a deep breath and decided. All right, both of them immediately took action. "Come, let's go take a look as well." Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong glanced at each other, and then they led their clansmen to take action as well. For a time, only a little over 10 people remained on the plateau, and most of them had followed them to the immortal court at the center. The tribulation clouds roiled while lightning surged, and the aura of the tribulation grew even more terrifying. However, these tribulations were targeted at Lin's son alone. Even though it was an extremely great threat to all the cultivators that had recovered their cultivations, it didn't affect their actions. Within the immortal court at the center, a heavenly punishment guillotine slashed down with a peerlessly dazzling blade light that seemed capable of splitting the heavens and the earth apart. Clang! Countless strands of sword chi flew out before Lin's son, and they transformed into a profound and unfathomable sword formation that blocked this lethal strike. The heavenly punishment guillotine was only locked in a stalemate for less than a moment before it was crushed by the boundless sword chi. On the other hand, Lin's son seemed as if he didn't notice this, and he was still practicing. The primordial Tao tree by his side emanated a myriad of strands of azure light, while the sound of scriptures being chanted ceaselessly, and it caused Lin's son to seem like an immortal from the last era that was creating techniques for his subordinates. When Qi Lingyun and the others charged into the immortal court, they saw such a scene, and they couldn't help but gasp while their hearts trembled. In their expectations, even if Lin's son was still alive after encountering such an unprecedented tribulation, he would probably be heavily injured and on the verge of death. But the reality was that Lin's son was utterly unharmed. How is this transcending tribulation? He's clearly comprehending the Tao. Technique development. Someone cried out involuntarily and was shocked. He was still able to comprehend the Tao under such a great tribulation. All of this seemed to be too unbelievable. The hearts of everyone were unable to calm down, and they noticed Lin's son's current state as well. They couldn't help but feel that it was inconceivable, and it was as if they were witnessing a miracle. All of them had experienced the vicissitudes of life, and they'd watched the rise and fall of the world. What sort of great storms and strange events hadn't they seen before? But the scene before their eyes had completely exceeded their imagination, and it was even to the extent that they were unable to understand it. It's the power of the primordial Tao tree. The legendary root of the immortal world actually survived the destruction of the last era. Mu Yi's eyes were bloodshot, and his heart was burning. He was so excited that he was slightly out of control. Even in the eternal true world, the primordial myriad Tao tree was without a doubt a supreme divine object, and it was practically impossible to see it. Unbelievable, too unbelievable. No wonder Lin Sun was able to draw down the ultimate ancestral tribulation. The primordial Tao tree was born from the karmic luck of the last era, and it's said to be the origin of the immortal Tao. It's sufficient for anyone to grasp a chance to attain the Tao. Zhong Lixiao was stunned as well, and his gaze was filled with fervor. There was only a single thought in his mind, and it was to seize this treasure no matter what. Even though Qi Pejuan didn't speak, the resolution in his eyes revealed that he was determined to obtain the primordial Tao tree as well. At this moment, the fluctuations caused by Lin Sun's technique development were too great. 10,000 scriptures resonated, 3,000 grand Taos appeared, and he had even drawn down an unprecedented great tribulation. Even if it was at an ordinary time, the others would still want to kill him, let alone at such a critical moment. No one wished for him to live. Not to mention that the primordial Tao tree that was reputed to be the supreme treasure of the last era was glowing with a jade green light. Its leaves fluttered as if it was chanting scriptures, and it was shocking and caused everyone to covet it. However, the heavenly tribulation was still going on, and it caused no matter how the killing intent in their hearts burned, none of them dared to approach it as they were deeply afraid of being affected by it. Even if he survives after overcoming the tribulation, he'll definitely be at his weakest. At that time, destroy him at the first possible moment. Qi Lingyun decided on the spot and gave the order. The others nodded. They were distributed throughout the surroundings, and they seemed to be in a tight encirclement while accumulating strength while waiting, causing the atmosphere in the central immortal court to become even more murderous and terrifying. The gazes everyone shot at Lin Sun wished for nothing more than for him to be struck to death by the heavenly tribulation right away. However, to their disappointment, the surging heavenly tribulation was blasted apart by the might emanated from Lin Sun's body, and it was unable to injure him in the slightest. The more it was like this, the more fearful those cultivators were, and their killing intent towards him grew even stronger. They didn't dare imagine how terrifying the ancestor realm cultivation such a heaven-defying figure possessed would be if he was allowed to survive. At that time, could anyone of the same generation in the world go against him? The dazzling glow of lightning illuminated the expressions of these people to the point their expressions flickered indeterminately, whereas Lin Sun, who'd always been in a state of comprehension, seemed to be completely unaware of all of this. They didn't have to wait for long. The final wave of the heavenly tribulation had arrived. The boundless violet gold lightning torrents in the depths of the sky had condensed into a ball, and it transformed into a strange decree. The decree revealed a chaotic color that was like ink, and it flowed with the aura of a myriad of tribulations. Moreover, countless obscure and indescribable marks of destruction surged into appearance on it. The sorrowful sighs of the gods could be faintly heard from within the decree. P.S. I wasn't in a good state, so I didn't update tonight. Chapter 2645. The entire place was deathly silent. All of them were shocked by the decree formed from the final tribulation because the aura that suffused it was simply terrifying to the point that even the hearts of all of them who were spectators were shaken. It was too terrifying. It was filled with a strange and unknown color that had never been seen or heard of since ancient times. When the talisman swept down, it was silent and ignored the shackles of time and space. In an instant, it covered Lin Sun's entire body. The peerless power that emanated from Lin Sun's body couldn't resist it at all. Under the horrified gazes of everyone, Lin Sun, who was immersed in enlightenment and method development, suddenly froze, motionless. Everyone knew that Lin Sun had encountered a fatal danger. Silently, the strange and terrifying talisman emitted a destructive rain of lightning, and vaguely, traces of obscure order power surged out. The expressions of Qi Lingyun and the others changed. The order power within the talisman tribulation, lightning, simply exceeded their understanding and imagination. It was terrifying to the extreme. At the very least, its power wasn't inferior to the rarest order power of Heaven Rank 9. Qi Lingyun and the others all had immortal forces behind them, standing tall in the eighth heaven. Their understanding of order power was naturally far from ordinary people. One could imagine how terrifying the order power within the Talisman Tribulation Lightning was to be able to make them tremble in fear. They don't intend to give him any chance to become an ancestor. He definitely won't be able to resist such a tribulation. Zhong Li Zhao's heart was burning with eagerness. He was waiting for Lin Sun's death to snatch the primordial Dao tree. What a pity. Qi Lingyun sighed. Lin Sun's cultivation was powerful. If the Qi clan could use him, he would definitely be of great use in the future. However, Qi Lingyun didn't feel regretful. She would only be at ease if Lin Sun died. At this moment, everyone could see that Lin Sun couldn't make it. No matter how heaven-defying and dazzling his performance was, he couldn't resist the Talisman Tribulation Lightning at all. Rise! Suddenly, a roar sounded, and Mu Yi's figure rushed out. He actually made a move at this moment. From 100 feet away, he raised his hand and threw out an alms bowl. It was filled with an ancient and terrifying aura, and a cold light flashed as it covered the primordial Dao tree. Obviously, he couldn't wait any longer and intended to seize the primordial myriad Dao tree first. The faces of Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pejuan, and the others sank, and they were just about to stop him. Boom! An earth-shattering sound suddenly resounded, and it shook everyone present to the point their vital blood roiled while their hearts trembled. Lin Sun, who was imprisoned by the Talisman Tribulation Lightning, emitted a golden aura that transformed into a figure that swung its fists with unparalleled might. This was not Lin Sun's real body, but his fighting will. It was the invincible method he had been refining and deducing during this period of time. At this moment, it gave birth to the most powerful martial will. Bang! The Black Alms Bowl was sent flying with a single punch. That golden mandate unleashed its battle prowess in the air, as if an immortal was practicing his martial arts. Another punch was thrown out. Merely this imposing aura caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to fall into disorder, and it caused the bodies of some cultivators in the vicinity to stiffen while their minds fell into disorder. It was so uncomfortable that they coughed up blood. There were even a few people who were severely injured by that level of martial will and were sent flying. Everyone was horrified and dumbfounded. How powerful was this martial will? What kind of Tao and method did Lin Sun evolve? He was actually strong to such a level, and it deeply shocked everyone's heart. Mu Yi turned pale with fright. Who would have thought that Lin Sun, who was supposed to be dead for sure, would have such an invincible martial will appear at this critical moment? The alms bowl was sent flying, and Lin Sun's martial will punched through the air. Brilliant lights flew across the sky, and in the end, only a golden fist was left. It covered the entire area and smashed down with great force. Mu Yi could not dodge it no matter how he tried, let alone block it. The treasures in his hands were destroyed one after another, bursting into a rain of light. His whole body was trembling. It was the first time he was so afraid, and it was even more unbelievable. He, the Juetian great ancestor, could not even block a single martial will. But it was too late. This was an invincible martial will that Lin Sun had cultivated while comprehending Tao. It directly smashed Mu Yi, and he exploded with a loud bang. Broken bones and flesh splattered everywhere. Both his body and soul were destroyed. How is this possible? Many people cried out involuntarily, feeling cold all over. This was just a kind of fist intent. Lin Sun's real body was imprisoned by the Talisman Tribulation Thunder, but he easily killed a Juetian great ancestor. This made everyone's hair stand on end. Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, and the others felt a chill in their hearts. Mu Yi's combat strength was not much worse than theirs, but he was killed by a single martial will. Even his life-saving treasures could not block that terrifying punch. In fact, this punch was too fast, too fierce, and too overbearing. Mu Yi did not even have time to use his trump card before he died. But even so, this bloody scene was terrifying in the eyes of everyone. Under the Hongmeng tree, Lin Sun suddenly opened his eyes. They were like two golden lamps, dazzling. Wherever his eyes passed, many people felt as if their souls were being torn apart and their pores stood on end. Although he was still covered by the talisman tribulation thunder and had not moved, he had already emitted an extremely strong and powerful aura that made everyone tremble. His eyes were sharp, like an unsheathed sword, extremely brilliant. They drew bolts of lightning in the sky and rushed in all directions, shocking everyone. Just his gaze was so terrifying. How strong was his martial will? Many people's hearts trembled, their backs were cold, and they had goosebumps. Lin Sun, who was thought to be dead, did not turn into ashes. Instead, he opened his eyes and revealed an unparalleled power. This was beyond everyone's expectations. It even made people suspect that he had comprehended his own supreme great method and had the strength to look down on all the people in the same realm. Far away from the crowd, Xiang Xieyuan and Lu Xiangque's hearts relaxed, and the depths of their eyes were filled with extreme excitement. He woke up. Lin Sun did not die. In enlightenment, one's mind wandered into the void, forgetting oneself and everything else. There was only Tao in one's eyes, and nothing else could be tolerated. This was also the reason why cultivators would choose a quiet place to cultivate in seclusion, far away from the clamor of the world, especially for deep-level enlightenment. For people like Lin Sun, he was completely oblivious to himself, and his mind wandered into the void, forgetting everything. Even if a great tribulation descended, it would be difficult for him to wake up. Now, he had finally woken up. This was naturally the scene that all the cultivators present were most unwilling to see. Under the Hongmeng tree, the myriad of leaves swayed and rustled as if they were flipping through ancient scriptures and reciting the eternal laws and Tao that crossed the past, present, and future, resounding without end. Suddenly, a strand of blood flowed out from the corner of Lin Sun's mouth, and it dripped onto his clothes. It was a shocking sight, and it stunned many people. After that, they realized that Lin Sun might have woken up from enlightenment, but he was still imprisoned by the talisman tribulation thunder, and the power of the tribulation still hadn't been dispelled. The expressions of Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, and Qi Pejuan were very interesting. Just a moment ago, they were shocked and worried, but in the next moment, they relaxed, and their brows stretched as they revealed a look of relief. Hey, the tribulation hasn't disappeared. It's most likely that his Taoist foundation has been injured. Someone said gloatingly. That mandate will from earlier had clearly caused him to suffer a backlash. Right now, he's just putting on a strong front, but weak on the inside. Who's going up to take his head? Someone laughed out loud. In truth, this was a test. Although they said so, no one stepped forward. They were all looking at the others for fear of following in Mu Yi's footsteps. After all, that scene was too terrifying. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd with a sneer on his lips. Instead, he closed his eyes with a calm posture, as if he wasn't afraid that they dared to attack him. He was savoring the wonderful state of enlightenment just now. The harvest this time was really too great. In one fell swoop, he completely fused the immortal path and the netherworld path that belonged to the last era with the cultivation of this era, and achieved an extreme transformation. Moreover, the various Taoist skills that he mastered were also completely fused with the complete immortal path that belonged to the origin Taoist code, and achieved the ultimate breakthrough. It could be said that he had thoroughly refined Taoist and Dharma to the extreme and completely fused them, showing a complete and immeasurable transformation. As for the matter of passing the tribulation, it was completely unintentional. After achieving the extreme breakthrough of his Taoist and Dharma, his cultivation also broke through in one fell swoop and reached an incredible level. When flowers bloom, butterflies come. It was the enlightenment in front of the Hongmeng tree that made Lin Sun, who was completely unprepared for breaking the realm, naturally achieve a real comprehensive transformation. As for the talisman tribulation thunder that was imprisoned in his body, Lin Sun didn't care about it all. The strange destructive power of the order imprinted in it might be able to easily kill an immortal. But at this moment, it was like a prey that came to the door, being suppressed and refined by the Nirvana order little by little. The only drawback was that the power of the talisman Tribulation Thunder could not be completely refined. With his current cultivation, he couldn't escape from the imprisonment. But Lin Sun didn't care. It was also at this moment that everyone suddenly noticed that the talisman Tribulation Thunder that imprisoned Lin Sun was actually faintly showing signs of being swallowed by Lin Sun's body. It was branded with the strange and unknown destructive power of the order, and it represented divine punishment. How could it be refined? Everyone's expression changed, and they realized that the situation was bad. We must not allow him to survive this tribulation. Attack! Qi Lingyun, who had always been indifferent and elegant, was completely unable to remain calm at this moment. Even the talisman that was branded with the Order of the Tribulation couldn't kill him. If he was allowed to survive, how terrifying would his power be? Bang! Zhong Lixiao was the first to attack. He opened his mouth and whistled, and a gale tore through the void and swept towards the Hongmeng tree. A Taoist diagram surged out from the gale, and it rumbled as it pressed down. It was more of a defensive force. Obviously, he was mainly testing Lin Sun. Moreover, he didn't attack Lin Sun directly for the sake of the Hongmeng tree, because he was probably extremely fearful of Lin Sun. Lin Sun's eyes were still closed, and he remained motionless. However, a strand of mighty and dazzling martial will charged out from his body, and he stretched out his hands in the void and tore it lightly. The mysterious Taoist diagram that was wrapped in the gale was torn into two on the spot. Chapter 2646. Zhong Lixiao's pupils constricted. This kind of martial will made everyone frown. Lin Sun was clearly suppressed by the talisman Tribulation Lightning, but he could still use this kind of method to fight. It was truly unimaginable. In the end, he hasn't passed the tribulation yet. Otherwise, he wouldn't just be using his martial will. This is the best opportunity to kill him. Qi Lingyun's voice was cold. Kill! When they heard this, all the heroes stood up and attacked together. Naturally, there were some among them who wanted to kill Lin Sun and seize his good fortune. But most of them wanted the primordial Tao tree. This was a supreme treasure of an era. Who wouldn't covet it? Taking advantage of this chaotic situation, as long as they could get close, even if they didn't want to take the whole tree, just breaking a branch would be enough. This was the true immortal Tao root. It carried the origin power of the immortal Tao. Its value was immeasurable, enough to make immortals go crazy. Otherwise, nobles like Zhong Lixiao and the others from the Eighth Heaven wouldn't be so impulsive. Condense. Someone chanted an obscure Tao scripture. Terrifying divine flames circulated around his body. His eyes were cold as he charged forward crazily. There was only one primordial Tao tree. Even if it was broken, there wouldn't be enough for everyone. Go! A dull explosion, as deafening as thunder, was heard. A monarch ancestor wielding a giant sword enshrouded in dense laws of lightning also charged toward the Hongmeng tree. But what was faster than them was a golden bolt of lightning. It was unbelievably fast. Upon closer inspection, it was a golden sparrow. Its entire body seemed to be made of immortal gold, dazzling and dazzling. It spread its wings and soared into the sky, faster than everyone. It clearly controlled the extremely heaven-defying space laws. Similarly, it was the first existence to approach the primordial Tao tree. It stretched out a pair of giant golden claws and was about to pull the tree away. Boom! A powerful battle chi soared into the sky, turning into a golden river that violently knocked it away. This was the power of Lin Sun's martial will. Not only that, all the power that rushed towards the primordial Tao tree was blocked, turning into a rain of light. Everyone was terrified. One had to know that there were hundreds of people attacking at this moment, and every one of them was an overlord in the Emperor realm. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to kill their way to the ascended stage. But now, they couldn't even break through the obstruction of a martial will. Screech! The golden sparrow let out a sharp cry, seeming to be unwilling. He didn't retreat, but advanced instead. His resplendent golden wings tore apart the sky as he dove down. He opened his mouth and charged towards a grand mist tree once more, as if he wanted to swallow the tree into his body. The golden bird beak was even sharper than a heavenly blade. It tore through the sky, and when it opened, it seemed to be able to swallow all things. However, a terrifying change was taking place. The golden sparrow, whose golden wings covered the sky and pressed down on the heavens, was suddenly grabbed by the power of that martial will. It let out a long, angry cry, but it couldn't break free. Instead, it was crushed by Lin Sun's martial will. Bang! The golden rain of light mixed with blood splashed high into the air. This golden sparrow was an anomaly in the ultimate emperor realm. It was even more terrifying than those in the same realm. But he still couldn't resist Lin Sun's divine power, and both his body and soul were destroyed. Open! A loud shout that was as heavy as iron rang out. Lin Feng, who had always been a man of few words, made his move. He held a simple and unadorned saber in his hand. He took a step forward and slashed out with the saber that he had been preparing for a long time. Whoosh! A peerless black saber aura flashed. Lin Sun's martial will that was obstructing the primordial tree was instantly slashed into two, and it was completely crushed by the black saber aura that swept out with a rumble. The power of a single saber strike was shocking. Everyone was shocked by this saber strike at first, and then they couldn't help but reveal excited expressions. How could Lin Sun, whose martial will had been severed and who was trapped by the decree's tribulation lightning, protect the primordial Tao tree? Kill! Attack! A wave of shouts resounded in the battlefield. Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pajuan, and the others charged towards the primordial Tao tree at practically the first moment. Lin Feng, who'd severed Lin Sun's martial will with a single saber strike, was undoubtedly the fastest person. His figure practically didn't stop before he arrived before the primordial tree. However, he was just about to make a move when he realized something, and his figure suddenly retreated explosively. Subsequently, the expressions of Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pajuan, and the others changed abruptly, and they dodged without the slightest hesitation. Before the others could react, a strand of sword aura shot through the sky like a divine rainbow, and it swept over from nearby. Pooh! 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 Over 10 cultivators that charged at the front were like crops in a field before this sword strike, and they were slashed horizontally. Their bodies split apart while their soul cores shattered into pieces, causing blood to spray like a waterfall. The defensive strength and treasures they possessed, and the defenses they possessed before their deaths were completely like paper and were utterly unable to resist this attack. On the other hand, the people behind them were lucky enough to survive, and they broke out in cold sweat from shock. They simply seemed as if they'd taken a trip to the gates of hell. That sword aura was too terrifying. It was all-powerful. Right at this moment, everyone noticed that it was surprisingly Lin Sun who'd executed this sword strike. The tribulation lightning that covered his body had vanished a long time ago, and it revealed his tall and slender figure. Moreover, his formidable aura covered the heavens and the earth, and it pressed down upon the surroundings. He succeeded in overcoming the tribulation. The hearts of everyone sank, and they were surprised and bewildered. The might of the tribulation lightning had actually been dispersed, and this was inconceivable. Are all of you done playing around? Lin Sun's black pupils were like bolts of lightning as he swept the surroundings with his gaze. His voice wasn't loud, yet it seemed to carry an invisible and terrifying, dignified aura, and it caused the hearts of everyone to tremble. Everyone retreated, their expressions uncertain. Before, Lin Sun killed Mu-Yi, a great ancestor of the Zhou Ying Emperor, and crushed Golden Sparrow with only his martial will. How terrifying would Lin Sun be now? We have no ill intentions towards you. We are only after the opportunity of the primordial myriad Tao tree. The person at the front braced himself and said. Lin Sun ignored him and stared at Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, and Qi Pajuan, who were also at the forefront. His eyes swept over these old enemies one by one. and his killing intent was undisguised. At this moment, he'd already successfully overcome the tribulation and stepped into the extermination ancestor realm, causing his cultivation to undergo a tremendous change. Different from ordinary ninth realm ancestors, during the period of enlightenment in front of the Hongmeng tree, Lin Sun had integrated the immortal Tao, the netherworld Tao, and his own Tao of the last era into one and achieve the extreme breakthrough. Because of this, he was able to immediately master a complete progenitor great Tao, and not just one. He could not be called the Zhu Shui great progenitor. He should be called the apex myriad Tao ancestor. This was fundamentally different from other emperor ancestors. Ordinary emperor ancestors could only condense a complete progenitor great Tao, even if they mastered many great Taos. This great Tao could accommodate other great Taos, but other great Taos were unable to replace this progenitor great Tao. But for Lin Sun, any great Tao could be condensed into the profundities of the progenitor realm, and he could display the supreme and extreme might of this realm. This was the difference. Moreover, Lin Sun was an apex myriad Tao ancestor, so he was completely different from the Zhu Shui great progenitor. Lin Sun, bow down and I'll spare your life. Some people were murderous, but they were actually just putting on a brave front. Their bodies were almost frozen when they were stared at by Lin Sun. Even though you've overcome the tribulation successfully, you're at your weakest now. Aren't you afraid of dying by fighting so many of us by yourself? Others shouted loudly and encouraged the others to attack together. As for Qi Lingyun and the others, they were using secret techniques to spy on Lin Sun and try to see through his secrets. They wanted to find out more about him. Because at this moment, Lin Sun didn't reveal a trace of weakness at all, and it seemed as if the unparalleled great tribulation from before hadn't injured him at all. Let's see if I dare. Meanwhile, Lin Sun spoke. He vanished on the spot and transformed into an expanse of monstrous divine radiance that charged forward. Perhaps it could be called a gale because it was too domineering. It swept through the heavens and the earth like a violent gale. Numerous treasures and techniques rumbled as they exploded into pieces, and they were utterly unable to obstruct Lin Sun at all. All the people in front of him were blasted flying while bleeding from all 7 apertures. All of them were horrified, and their expressions changed while their scalps went numb. This surmight shook the hearts of all. No! Someone cried out loudly and tried to dodge. However, chaotic chi surged over while a large hand pressed down upon the world and crushed all things into pieces. This person was exactly that fellow that was shouting arrogantly earlier. At this moment, he was directly blasted apart in midair. Moreover, this was merely the beginning. As Lin Sun attacked, his tall figure was like a celestial emperor that swept through the battlefield. Every single move he made emanated monstrous might, and the universe and the scriptures of the world seemed to resonate with it. Rumble! Divine light shot out and surged towards the surroundings. Numerous imperial weapons and techniques were circulated to their limits by those cultivators, and they could easily obliterate the sun, moon, mountains, and rivers. However, they were like illusionary bubbles that rumbled and exploded into pieces before Lin Sun. All techniques and imperial weapons were swept away like a whirlwind, and they were easily destroyed. It was like he'd entered an unstoppable state. In merely the blink of an eye, over 10 cultivators were crushed on the spot. Some were blasted into pieces by the force of his fist. Some were slapped apart by the winds of his palm. Some were slashed apart by sword chi. Some were incinerated by the monstrous glow of the Tao. It was swift, violent, and overbearing like a hot knife through butter. Lin Sun's seemingly invincible and murderous state caused the surroundings to be thrown into great chaos. Countless astounded voices resounded while the hearts of everyone trembled with fear. Lin Sun, who wasn't suppressed by the tribulation lightning, was simply like a peerless emperor, and he possessed a great, imposing aura capable of devouring the world and sweeping through the universe. Clang! A spear that seemed as if it was made from black gold rumbled as it whistled out from Zhongli Zhao's hand, and it tore through space as it pierced towards Lin Sun at an unbelievable speed. Clang! The black spear was clamped between two of Lin Sun's fingers, and it was unable to move at all. Everyone, he's invincible. Quickly attack together and kill him. Zhongli Zhao's expression turned grim, and it was filled with shock and rage. He was an imperial ancestor, yet his full force strike had actually been blocked by Lin Sun's fingers. He almost didn't dare believe his eyes. Pooh! Lin Sun's response was a blunt punch from Lin Sun. After this strike, Zhongli Zhao spat a large mouthful of blood and was blasted flying. Moreover, his body was shaken to the point it cracked apart and bled. This is impossible. Zhongli Zhao cried out loudly as he was unable to accept this. They were both imperial ancestors, yet Lin Sun, who just advanced, possessed a crushing strength that easily defeated him, who'd attained the peak of the martial ancestor realm for countless years. This seemed to be too inconceivable. At this moment, Qi Lingyun, Qi Pajuan, Lin Feng, and the others revealed solemn expressions while their hearts trembled slightly. At this moment, Lin Sun was formidable to an unprecedented extent. He was unfathomable and unfathomable. P.S. There's something wrong with the goldfish's body, so there's no need to wait for me to update it. Chapter 26:47. The entire battlefield was silent. Everyone was shocked. Lin Sun, who had broken free from the calamity, seemed to have become a completely different person. The power he wielded was so terrifying that they couldn't see through him at all. Wasn't Mui powerful? The Zhu Ying great ancestor from the eighth heaven could be said to be invincible, except for those in the same realm. But he was killed by Lin Sun's martial will. But now, as Lin Sun broke free from the calamity, he displayed his own power. He killed emperors like slaughtering chickens, and great ancestors like cutting grass. Even someone as powerful as Zhongli Zhao was easily defeated in a head-on battle. All of this shocked and terrified everyone. Their expressions kept changing, and their hearts were terrified to the extreme. How can he be so powerful? He passed an unprecedented calamity and established a way to suppress the past and the present. Qi Lingyun's pupils shrank. She had once forced Lin Sun to bow his head, and then she wanted to kill him. Now, seeing Lin Sun's combat power, besides boiling killing intent, there was a chill in her. Rumor has it that only the descendants of the eternal gods can touch the threshold of invincibility in the Zhu Ying great ancestor realm. Lin Sun, could he have also touched this realm? Qi Pajuan frowned, and a layer of terrifying killing intent appeared on his body. He felt great pressure and threat. Lin Sun is not a descendant of the eternal gods. I don't believe that there is really an invincible person in this realm, in this world, Lin Feng said expressionlessly. Lin Sun was too powerful. He deeply threatened everyone's confidence, giving them a bad premonition. Even their fighting spirit was shaken. With a boom, the immortal palace shook, and the light of the way spread. Lin Sun was like an immortal looking down on everyone. As he stepped forward, the world trembled. The entire void seemed to be unable to contain his true body. Incomparably bright light of the way swept out from his body. Puff! The people at the front were directly shattered by the terrifying fighting power. Blood splattered everywhere, bones were broken, and tendons were torn. Their bodies exploded. There were hundreds of cultivators in the immortal palace, and all of them were overlords on the emperor's path. But now, dozens of them were killed by Lin Sun in the blink of an eye. From beginning to end, no one could withstand his sharpness. This scene was extremely terrifying. Lin Sun was invincible and unstoppable. This was a type of invincible might. What are you all waiting for? Waiting to die? Let's kill him together. Otherwise, we'll all die. Someone roared. Puff! However, this person's words came to an abrupt halt, and his body split into two. A ray of sword chi cut out from Lin Sun's fingertips, like a divine rainbow running through the sky and the earth, and killed the man on the spot. Many people felt a chill from head to toe. At this moment, Lin Sun was not only heaven-defying in cultivation, but also the Taoism he displayed was incomparably terrifying. Every move he made had the power of the Emperor's Road. They weren't mistaken. While comprehending the Tao before the primordial Tao tree this time, Lin Sun hadn't just refined his Grand Tao and undergone an extreme transformation. He'd even completely fused the various imperial scriptures he possessed with the origin scripture of the last era. Now, as soon as he utilized the Grand Tao Furnace scripture, every single move he made was capable of resonating with all scriptures, and it produced a supreme battle force that reigned above all techniques in the world and conformed perfectly with him. Because this was his own Tao and Dharma. Just like this, although it was just a casual attack, the terrifying power shook the sun and moon. A vast pressure descended, and violent rumbling sounds came from his body. The light of the Tao burst forth, and the divine radiance spread in all directions. It was truly terrifying. Many cultivators who were close couldn't even withstand this pressure. Lines of blood appeared on their bodies, and they were almost shattered. Among the people present, only the peerless figures above the Emperor-Ancestor realm were slightly better. But their expressions also changed drastically. Although they were also Zhu Shui's Emperor-Ancestor, they are the top existences on the Emperor's Road in the Eighth Heaven, enough to deter those in the same realm and stand proudly at the peak of the Emperor's Road. But Lin Sun, who was in front of them, actually possessed a foundation and power that was sufficient to surpass them after transcending the tribulation. How could they not be shocked? Kill. I don't believe that he's really invincible. Chi Pujuan roared and suddenly turned into a silver rainbow. With a violent roar, he rushed towards Lin Sun. In his hand, there was a green Taoist seal that emitted boundless light. At the same time, dozens of cultivators also came to their senses, and one after another, they attacked with their magic treasures. Boom! A huge hole seemed to be poked in the heaven and earth. The turbulent energy surged like a boiling river and turned into a colorful torrent of power, rushing towards Lin Sun. The other Zhu Shui's emperor ancestors, such as Zhongli Shao and Lin Feng, also attacked at the same time. They released their combat power to the extreme and launched all kinds of magic skills at Lin Sun. Lin Sun's eyes were emotionless. He just gently raised his palm and pressed down with one hand. Bang! Chi Pujuan, who was flying towards Lin Sun, was easily swatted away by Lin Sun's palm like a fly. Then he waved his sleeves. Streams of mighty sword chi as thick as mountains swept out. Bang! 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 17 or 18 cultivators' defense power was broken by the unparalleled torrent of sword chi. Their bodies and souls were torn apart, and their chi and blood were boiling. They were almost blown up on the spot. And those below the Emperor-Ancestor realm were even more miserable. Their power, in front of Lin Sun at this time, was like glass in front of a divine hammer. It easily smashed the glass. Along with the rumbling sound of the sword chi spreading out, many people were killed on the spot, whereas the others were terrified. All of them controlled streaks of light and executed all the divine abilities they possessed to flee desperately in all directions. In the blink of an eye, there were only about 30 people left in the central immortal court. The other cultivators didn't dare to think about following Qi Lingyun to the eighth heaven for cultivation. They were already scared out of their wits by Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't stop them. In fact, even if he wanted to, he couldn't stop them. There were too many people. Hundreds of Emperor Realm cultivators were not ordinary experts. If they were determined to escape, Lin Sun could only kill a few of them, even if he used all his strength. What's more, he didn't care about these insignificant people from the beginning to the end. His chi had been firmly locked on Qi Lingyun, Zhongli Shao, and the others. They were his targets, and he had already launched an attack. His target was Qi Lingyun. Qi Lingyun's eyes narrowed slightly, but her expression was still calm. She didn't fight head-on, but kept far away. Kill. On the other side, Lin Feng rushed over first. The black saber in his hand tore through the void, stirring up a universe and stars. It was boundlessly terrifying. You're courting death, Lin Sun shouted. His voice shook the sun, moon, and rivers. Chaotic chi filled the air. He took a step forward and punched. He was like a celestial emperor descending to the mortal world, looking down on all living beings. Boom! Lin Feng flew out, blood spurting out of his mouth. There were many terrible wounds on his body. He chose to fight head-on, refusing to yield to reality. But the result was cruel. He was no match for Lin Sun. Back in the Great Void Immortal Realm, he fought head-on with Lin Sun to save Shui Zhongjing. At that time, Lin Sun was only an 8th grade emperor, but he was able to block his attack. But now, as Lin Sun broke through, he was injured in a head-on collision. This result made Lin Feng's expression change. But he was also terrifying. He had a firm and fearless fighting intent. He jumped forward and fought Lin Sun with his life. Clang! After a dozen rounds, Lin Sun pushed out his palm and sent Lin Feng's black saber flying. Lin Feng didn't dodge and directly blocked it with his fists. But the next moment, Lin Feng's fingers started to break inch by inch. Then his arms exploded and his body shook violently. He was smashed into pieces in the void, blood splashing everywhere. Lin Feng groaned in pain. His eyes were bloodshot. He had nowhere to run, and his spirit was about to be completely obliterated by Lin Sun. Clang! All of a sudden, a strange, shrill scream rang out. Lin Sun's figure suddenly stopped. The abyssal sword cauldron roared out, glowing with billions of rays of Taoist light, covering his whole body. An ear-splitting sound of collision resounded out as a flying shuttle that was branded with an eternal aura fiercely collided with the abyssal sword cauldron like a black bolt of lightning. And the energy that erupted from it was so terrifying that it caused the abyssal sword cauldron to suffer the impact and shake violently. Lin Sun's figure also shook, but he was not injured. How can he block it? Qi Lingyun was shocked. The flying shuttle was one of her trump cards. It was branded with the immortal aura. Let alone the Emperor Ancestor. Even the Emperor Ancestor Juetian would not be able to block it if he was caught off guard. But now, it was blocked by Lin Sun's sword cauldron. But this attack had also helped Lin Feng resolve a fatal crisis and save his life. His blood qi surged, and his shattered body recovered. However, his face was unprecedentedly solemn. Bang! The flying shuttle exploded, and this trump card was destroyed. After Lin Sun took out the abyssal sword cauldron, his aura skyrocketed again. He suddenly sprinted, broke through the layers of encirclement, and suddenly arrived in front of Zhong Li Xiao. Buddha, Demon Realm. An ancient black-colored scroll surged into appearance in front of Zhong Li Xiao. He opened it and shook it, causing countless worlds to appear before him. They were like numerous worlds that were like purgatory, and every single one of these worlds was covered in barriers that formed a terrifying defensive system that overlapped with each other. He was clearly in front of him, but it felt as if he was thousands of worlds away. There was no doubt that this black scroll was an incredible treasure. Phew! Zhong Li Xiao, who had just revealed his strongest defense, had just heaved a sigh of relief when he suddenly raised his head and saw the entire Buddha demon realm suddenly stiffen. Then, an unimaginably sharp and dazzling Taoist sword flashed out from Lin Sun's abyssal sword cauldron, and it fiercely pierced into the layered world barrier, as if it was invincible. Everywhere it passed, it seemed as if one world after another was disrupted and crushed, and a terrifying torrent of black light burst out. Zhong Li Xiao's soul almost came out of his body. This was his trump card of defense, but now, Lin Sun's sword had pierced through the endless barriers and destroyed countless worlds. In the void, a ray of dazzling light pierced through the sky. Zhong Li Xiao could even see the indifference on Lin Sun's face, but it was too late to dodge. Puff! The Taoist sword struck and deeply pierced through him. Zhong Li Xiao and his soul were completely minced into pieces by Lin Sun's sword, and he didn't even have the time to use the many life-saving means in his body before he was completely annihilated by the terrifying sword intent on Lin Sun's Taoist sword. He had truly perished, and his soul had dissipated. P.S. It's hard for me to write because I'm sick. I'm a little late. Please forgive me. Chapter 2648. Zhong Li Xiao was dead. Moreover, he was stabbed by Lin Sun's Taoist sword when he had all kinds of life-saving trump cards with him. He didn't even have time to use his trump card. Most of the life-saving trump cards carried by Emperor Ancestor Zhongli were branded with the power of immortality or some kind of powerful aura of order, and possessed all kinds of incredible magic. But he was not invincible. The abyssal sword cauldron in Lin Sun's hand, after years of tempering and transformation, was not afraid of the impact of these trump cards. It could be said to be indestructible. It should be known that the abyssal sword cauldron had refined countless immortal substances, and it had been nurtured by all kinds of order forces over the years. It had already become incredible. Although its power could not be compared with that of an immortal Taoist weapon, it was no longer comparable to an ordinary emperor weapon. He did not want to show it before, because he was afraid that these enemies would escape. But now it was time to show the dagger, and Lin Sun would not hide it anymore. Swish! Lin Sun operated the abyssal sword cauldron, and the rumbling sound seemed to collapse the sky. 3 or 4 cultivators did not even have time to react. Their bodies exploded in the air, and their bodies and souls were destroyed. That power was too terrifying. Before using the abyssal sword cauldron, Lin Sun was already invincible, and no one could stop him in the battlefield. As he operated the abyssal sword cauldron, his power soared aloft. The remaining cultivators' fighting spirit completely collapsed, and they fled in panic, not daring to hesitate or stay any longer. Although Lin Sun was alone, he looked down on the battlefield with an invincible momentum. This was a kind of great momentum that really dominated the world. Even the experts of the 4 East royal clans, such as Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong, had suffered heavy casualties in the previous battle. Only Gu Banzwang, Yun Luohong, and a few others took advantage of the chaos to escape. Soon, only Qi Lingyun, Qi Pejuan, Lin Feng, and a few others were left. We can't hesitate anymore. If we don't use our trump cards, we will all lose. Qi Lingyun's voice was cold, and she seemed extremely calm. Indeed, at this moment, Lin Sun was almost invincible, but the reason why they did not retreat was that they were unwilling to give up, and they had something to rely on. Boom! The void trembled violently as Lin Feng took action. He raised his hand, and a huge Dao imprint flew out. Its entire body was simple and unadorned, as if it was forged from black gold. The words overturning the heavens were engraved at the bottom, and they shone brilliantly. As soon as it flashed out, the sky-piercing seal transformed into the size of a mountain and pressed down towards Qinshi. The central immortal court trembled, collapsing with a rumble. If not for the obscure law power protecting this place would have definitely sunk. Clang! Lin Sun attacked like a celestial emperor, resisting with the abyssal sword cauldron. The two burst out with the most dazzling light, like the eruption of 100,000 volcanoes, spreading out a destructive torrent, shocking everyone. Everyone trembled and took a step back. 2 individuals were grazed, their bodies cracking apart and dripping with blood. Their bodies were fiercely blasted outwards. This kind of power was too domineering, exceeding everyone's expectations. Lin Sun raised his brows. This sky-split seal was no small matter. Not only was it filled with the aura of eternity, it even faintly surged with strands of order energy. It was miraculous and unfathomable. If it wasn't for that, Lin Feng wouldn't have been able to resist this attack at all. At the same time, Lin Feng was extremely shocked. The sky-split seal was a treasure obtained by an undying great figure of the Qi clan. It had a great origin, and it was said to be a natural treasure born from the source of order. It was unparalleled in the world, and it was said to be able to overturn the heavens and earth with a single seal. This time, Lin Feng had the chance to borrow this treasure as a trump card when he followed Qi Lingyun. Otherwise, with his status in the Qi clan, he didn't have the qualifications to use this treasure at all. But at this moment, even the powerful sky-split seal was blocked. Lin Sun attacked fiercely, domineering as he attacked once more. Lin Feng didn't dare to be careless, and he almost desperately used the sky-split seal. The power that belonged to the extermination ancestor realm on his body was boundlessly terrifying like a tsunami. Lin Sun was indifferent, and he used the abyssal sword cauldron to block it head-on. Clang! 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 Every single strike was world-shocking. Even though the sky-split seal was undamaged, Lin Feng was shaken to the point that his blood roiled. His figure kept moving backwards, and in the end, blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. Kill! At the critical moment, Chi Pujuan attacked. A violet gold gourd appeared before him, and a boundless river of stars poured out from the gourd. It was like an ocean that drowned the heavens and the earth, and it was boundlessly terrifying. The river of stars surged with strands of immortal aura, and it covered the void and destroyed everything. This was an extremely terrifying scene. It was just a river of stars, but it seemed to melt everything in the world and destroy all the living beings within it. On the violet gold gourd, various totems emerged, and it was like the legendary Taoist primogenitor that sat above the 9 heavens, controlling the river of stars from afar and dancing in the universe. Undoubtedly, the violet gold gourd was an incredible weapon of slaughter. It was suffused with immortal divinity, and it wanted to melt Lin Sun. In an instant, Lin Sun's figure that was attacking valiantly became sluggish, and he was struck by the river of stars as if he had fallen into an ocean. On the other side, Lin Feng operated the Sky Split Seal and attacked fiercely as well. He cooperated with Chi Pujuan, and they actually faintly showed signs of suppressing Lin Sun. Many people's spirits were lifted when they saw this. Chi Lingyun made a prompt decision and said, "Everyone, what are you waiting for? There's no way back now. Let's go together and kill him." Kill! A group of people roared and rushed forward. All kinds of weapons, including pagodas, ancient lamps, jade rulers, swords. The light of treasures fluttered and shot all over the sky, and they rushed towards Lin Sun together. Among them, there were all kinds of extremely mysterious trump cards, like talismans branded with immortal will and scrolls full of monstrous killing power. Such power could easily kill the Emperor Ancestor. Boom! An earth-shattering roar resounded. An extremely terrible torrent of destruction was produced in the area where Lin Sun was, and it completely drowned the void. This was definitely a fatal calamity. Any Emperor Realm cultivator would not be able to escape death if they were here. However, soon people were shocked. With the splashing of light and treasures, the place where Lin Sun was destroyed, and the void collapsed, but he was safe and sound. He stood there with a deep look in his eyes. The abyssal sword cauldron floated above his head, and hundreds of millions of lights fell down, protecting him as if he was invincible. The terrifying fatal blow just now failed to break the defense of the abyssal sword cauldron. This, Chi Lingyun's expression changed. The pupils of the others contracted, and they felt a chill in their hearts. In this attack, they had used all their trump cards. All of them could threaten the lives of immortals. However, it was still not enough in front of Lin Sun. Clang! Lin Sun's figure did not move, but a Taoist sword swept out of the abyssal sword cauldron and flew straight forward. Pooh! A light sound resounded as the space between the brows of a cultivator exploded apart, and a bloody hole was pierced through his body. Scarlet red blood sprayed into the air as he fell straight to the ground. This was an Emperor Ancestor who had followed Chi Pujuan for tens of thousands of years, but he could not resist the power of Lin Sun's sword. Suddenly, there was an awkward silence, and the battle cries subsided. Many people were frightened and subconsciously stopped. However, Lin Sun's attack did not stop. The abyssal sword cauldron suppressed the heaven and earth, and endless lights fell like a vast waterfall, and also like the Milky Way. The purple gold gourd and the sky-throwing seal were trembling violently. It was not that these two treasures were not powerful enough, but that the people who used them could not withstand Lin Sun's attack at all. With a bang, several people in the field had their bones broken and their tendons torn. Their bodies were smashed into pieces, and their primordial spirits turned into ashes. They died immediately. At this time, Lin Sun's murderous intent soared to the sky, and he used the strongest means to kill his enemies. In the end, only Chi Lingyun, Chi Pujuan, and Lin Feng were left on the battlefield. The others were either killed or had already escaped. But at this time, a powerful Chi suddenly broke out and approached Lin Sun and hit his back. It was Chi Lingyun, and as soon as she attacked, she came to Lin Sun's back, holding a bloody black demon subduing pestle. and stabbed it towards Lin Sun's back. It was incredibly fast. At this time, Lin Sun was fighting against Lin Feng's sky-throwing seal and Chi Pajuan's purple gold gourd. In other people's eyes, it was impossible for him to avoid this attack from the back. But who would have thought? Lin Sun did not dodge at all. Behind him, Greenwood Taoist body suddenly rushed out and punched. The power of the punch could destroy mountains and rivers and destroy the sun, the moon, and the stars. Clang! In the sound of the collision, although the demon's subduing pestle was blocked, Lin Sun was alarmed and felt a sense of crisis. It was also at this moment that the demon's subduing pestle in Qi Lingyun's hand released wisps of forbidden, ferocious aura. A bloody Taoist diagram appeared on the blood-stained pestle and enveloped the Greenwood Taoist body. Greenwood Taoist body flashed and suddenly disappeared from Lin Sun's body. At the same time, the abyssal sword cauldron pressed down and endless Taoist light emerged, blocking Lin Sun's back. Boom! The void exploded and chaos surged. This place was in chaos. The demon's subduing pestle in Qi Lingyun's hand exploded. It was a secret weapon after all. After its power was blocked, it was no longer a deterrent. Qi Lingyun originally wanted to destroy this rare trump card to make Lin Sun's blood stain in the sky and make him seriously injured. Unfortunately, she miscalculated. She was also decisive. She escaped far away at the first time, but her expression was uncertain. At the same time, Lin Feng attacked Lin Sun again, controlling the sky-throwing seal to attack Lin Sun. Thousands of traces of the Great Way covered the sky and the earth. On the other side, Chi Pajuan used the purple gold gourd to attack Lin Sun. "It's been too long. I'll send you on your way," Lin Sun said and stepped out. The abyssal sword cauldron floated up and down, and its power was unparalleled in the world. Boom! The power of Dozhan surged and swept out. Before long, even Lin Feng and Chi Pajuan could not bear it anymore. They coughed up blood, suppressed by the power of Lin Sun and injured. In the end, Lin Sun roared and used the abyssal sword cauldron to suppress the demon's subduing pestle, confining it in the void and making it unable to move. Immediately after, Lin Sun attacked and punched. Boom! This punch directly penetrated Lin Feng's chest, causing him to explode on the spot. No secret skill or magic treasure could block this peerless attack. This Emperor Zhu Xian, who came from the fifth heaven and was worshipped by the Qi clan of the eighth heaven, was directly killed on the spot. Qi Lingyun's whole body was stiff, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had planned to rescue Lin Sun at all costs, but she did not expect it to happen so fast. So fast that she could not save him even if she wanted to. Chapter 2649. This battle had only lasted for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. But Emperor Zhu Sun had fallen one after another. Mu Yi, who was killed by Lin Sun's martial will, Zhong Li Xiao, whose body was cut open by Lin Sun's Taoist sword, and Lin Feng, who was smashed by Lin Sun's fist. During this period, more and more cultivators, who could be called overlords of the Emperor realm, fell under Lin Sun's feet. Many people had already fled, frightened by Lin Sun's invincible power. This result made people feel like falling into an ice cellar. At this moment, the whole battlefield was silent. At this point, the people who were still alive were in despair. How could they fight? They were no match for Lin Sun at all. What was worse, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Chi Pajuan had tried to escape, but he was intercepted by Lin Sun as soon as he moved. Even if he used the forbidden secret method, he couldn't shake the abyssal sword cauldron. This made him completely terrified. At this point in the battle, only he and Qi Lingyun were left. Some had died, and some had fled. Qi Lingyun's face was pale. She had arrogantly asked Lin Sun to bow down to her, but now it seemed a little ridiculous. But she was different from Chi Pajuan. She was still calm and didn't panic. Or rather, she still had the confidence. Lin Sun didn't stop. In fact, he had never stopped since the beginning of the battle because he didn't allow his opponent to escape. "I'll fight you to the death." Seeing that Lin Sun was coming at him, Chi Pajuan, who had nowhere to run, let out a roar. As if he was ready to risk everything, countless bright beams of light shot out from between his eyebrows and interweaved into a universe. It was dazzling and vast, and it pressed down on Lin's sun. Rumble. In the universe, the sun, moon, and stars rotated, and the chaotic air was hazy, as if it was real. It was extremely incredible. Lin's sun didn't dodge. His figure shone brightly, and he stepped forward. Monstrous power spread from his body and turned into a deep and immeasurable abyss, directly smashing the world and swallowing the real universe in one fell swoop. Puff! Chi Pajun spat out a mouthful of blood, and a terrible wound appeared between his eyebrows. He couldn't believe that his strongest talent was swallowed, and he looked so weak. Kill! He activated the purple gold gourd, releasing an undying stellar stream that engulfed the skies, brilliant and dazzling. Lin Sun looked indifferent. His murderous intent was heavy and ruthless. At the same time, his figure flashed, and his 5 great Tao bodies shot out at the same time. They blocked the central immortal court at an unbelievable speed and attacked simultaneously. Boom! Amidst the rain of light, a figure staggered backwards in the sky. Surprisingly, it was Qi Lingyun. She'd utilized some sort of secret technique to actually transform into a formless body in an attempt to leave this place. However, Lin Sun saw through it and blocked it with his 5 Taoist bodies. You've killed so many people. Even if you leave this place alive, where can you escape to once you leave the god's ruins? Qi Lingyun's gaze was icy cold while her beautiful face was covered in frost. This elegant woman in a long dress and holding a scroll in her hand seemed to be in an extremely sorry state at this moment. She was unable to maintain her composure from before, and the space between her brows was covered in a gloomy expression. Lin Sun ignored him and focused on suppressing Qi Pajun. Rumble. Just like before, the scene that happened to Lin Feng replayed itself. First, the purple gold gourd was suppressed by the abyssal sword cauldron and imprisoned in the void. After that, Lin Sun took a step forward and punched out. Amidst the unparalleled brilliance, the defensive treasures on Qi Pajun's body exploded one by one like paper paste. Following that, the layers of defensive Taoist magic that covered Qi Pajun's body were crushed by the terrifying power of the fist. Puff! With a single punch, he was also killed. His body was directly penetrated and exploded into a rain of blood in the void. Then, he was completely annihilated by the boundless fist force. This Emperor Juexian from the Qi family of the 8th Heaven region also followed in the footsteps of Lin Feng, Zhongli Xiao, and Mu Yi and died here. At this moment, Qi Lingyun was the only opponent left in the central immortal court. The heaven and earth trembled, and the chaos was hazy. In front of Qi Lingyun, who was blocked in front of the immortal palace, pages of yellowed scriptures appeared. There were a total of 108 pages, and all of them were branded with immortal ancient characters of divinity, wriggling like earthworms. Lin Sun's 5 Taoist bodies attacked together, but they were actually unable to break the defensive power of these pages of scriptures. It should be known that each of the 5 Taoist bodies was comparable to the combat power of Lin Sun himself. Along with Lin Sun becoming an ancestor this time, the 5 Taoist bodies had also transformed, and their combat power was no longer what it used to be. However, the yellowed scriptures were really incredible. The power it produced was obscure and indescribable. It dissolved all the Taoist techniques and power one by one, and it couldn't hurt Qi Lingyun, who was protected by it at all. In the distance, Lin Sun himself walked over. His figure was tall, and his black hair was thick. His deep and sharp eyes stared at Qi Lingyun. Above his head was the abyssal sword cauldron. The mouth of the cauldron was like a waterfall, and millions of rays of light fell out, protecting him in it. He was like an immortal with supreme majesty. Seeing this, Qi Lingyun was still as calm as before. She said, "I admit that I misjudged you. Why don't we stop for a while and have a good talk? You don't want to be killed by those old things outside the god's relic when you leave this place, do you?" The pages of the scriptures were shining brightly, turning into a divine rainbow, and surrounding her slender figure. There was a faint, obscure, and mysterious chanting sound. All attacks were like bubbles, and they were blocked outside. This scene made Lin Sun realize that the scroll in Qi Lingyun's hand was probably an incredibly powerful treasure. Swish! After thinking about it, Lin Sun put away the 5 Taoist bodies. Seeing this, Qi Lingyun just breathed a sigh of relief and was about to say something. Lin Sun suddenly stepped forward and smashed the scriptures with the abyssal sword cauldron. Boom! Endless rays of light splashed, and the terrifying and overbearing power spread from the abyssal sword cauldron, shaking the yellowed scriptures violently and rolling. Qi Lingyun, who was in it, was shocked. Her pretty face suddenly changed, and she said, "Are you really going to kill me?" Lin Sun didn't say anything and continued to drive the abyssal sword cauldron to smash the scriptures. Dense rumbling sounds resounded. Every time the abyssal sword cauldron struck down, the yellowish pages of the scripture would tremble violently. After a few dozen strikes, the yellowish pages seemed to be unable to endure it any longer, and an ear-piercing buzzing sound resounded. Although she was temporarily not threatened, Qi Lingyun was shocked and angry to see Lin Sun's determination and ruthlessness. An indescribable feeling welled up in her heart. With her status, even the 8th heaven, she could be considered a dazzling figure. Even some of the older generation had to bow their heads in respect. In the realms below the 8th heaven, she was a goddess above the 9th heaven. She was unreachable and could only be admired. Not to mention emperors. Even immortals had to be courteous to her, because she was Qi Lingyun, the daughter of the current leader of the Qi clan. With this identity, even if she only had a little bit of cultivation, almost no one dared to provoke her, at least in the eternal true world. However, at this moment, Lin Sun's actions had completely shattered all of Qi Lingyun's knowledge, causing her dignity and pride to suffer a heavy blow. A character from the ancient Path of the Stars was not afraid of all kinds of threats. This was the first time she had met such an unscrupulous and fearless person. Boom! In the end, the defensive power formed by the yellowed scriptures was cracked by the abyssal sword cauldron. Under the impact, Qi Lingyun staggered and almost fell to the ground. Blood dripped from the corners of her mouth, and her beautiful face turned pale. "How dare you?" Seeing Lin Sun's hand reach out and grab her, Qi Lingyun shouted. The jade pendant in front of her, which was branded with the pattern of an yin and yang fish, suddenly released a golden divine light. Buzz! The golden divine light rolled and condensed into an ancient and primitive word, Qi, which suddenly bloomed in the void with a fierce and overbearing light of order. This was a surname written by the power of order, representing the power of the Qi clan, one of the 10 immortals. An indescribable fatal threat surged in Lin Sun's heart. There was no doubt that this surname, formed by the power of order, had unimaginable destructive power. He almost immediately stopped and attacked with the abyssal sword cauldron. Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron glowed and enveloped the golden word Qi in one fell swoop, suppressing it into the cauldron. Immediately after that, a deafening explosion resounded from the abyssal sword cauldron, as if a god was furious and rampaging in the cauldron, causing the abyssal sword cauldron to tremble violently. But in merely a short moment, everything returned to silence. The abyssal sword cauldron flowed with the glow of the Tao, yet it wasn't harmed in the slightest, whereas the golden Qi character that was suppressed within the cauldron had been forcefully crushed by the rebirth order, and it transformed into an extremely copious quintessence energy of order that was absorbed and devoured. Lin Sun even noticed that after the origin of order was absorbed, the order of the immortal path, the order of the netherworld, and the silent spirit of order, Peerless, seemed to be alarmed at almost the same time, and they attacked simultaneously to fight for the origin of order. In the blink of an eye, the origin of order was divided into 3 parts, and they were devoured by the order of the immortal path, the order of the netherworld, and the peerless melon. This scene was extremely inconceivable. The order of nirvana was like a mother that absorbed and refined the origin of order it gathered, and then transformed it into nourishment that nurtured the various orders it had reconstructed, causing these origin of order to become stronger as well. Especially Peerless, the spirit of order that was like a young girl. After she absorbed a portion of the origin of order, her delicate and fair face became much rosier, and she glowed with vitality. All of this took a long time to describe, yet it actually occurred in an instant. When she saw the trump card she'd utilized to save her life had actually been suppressed so easily. Qi Lingyun seemed as if she'd been struck by lightning, and her pupils dilated while she revealed an expression of disbelief. The origin of order within the Jade Pendant was the 9th grade heaven rank origin of order possessed by her Qi clan. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary 9th grade heaven rank origin of order. Its might could be said to be terrifying. Even though it was only the word Qi, its might could easily pose a lethal threat to an immortal. Yet now, it had been suppressed so easily. All of this overturned Qi Lingyun's understanding, and it caused her body to tremble while her expression changed completely. Moreover, the gaze she shot at Lin Sun carried uncontrollable terror. Exactly what sort of monster is this fellow before me? Chapter 2650. The yellowed pages of the scriptures danced in the air, but they couldn't stop Lin Sun. When the last trump card of the Qi was suppressed, Qi Lingyun couldn't help but feel a trace of despair. But she wasn't discouraged. Clang! A slender, snow-white sword shot out from her hand like a bolt of lightning. Its sharpness was strong enough to pierce through the sun, moon, and stars. But this sword was caught between Lin Sun's 2 fingers. It buzzed and trembled, unable to break free. Bang! As Lin Sun exerted force between his fingers, the snow-white and slender sword was broken into 2. When I was in the great void immortal realm, I thought that one day I'd like to see who would bow down to whom. I didn't expect this day to come so soon. Lin Sun's dark eyes locked on Qi Lingyun, but he didn't force her any further. This woman was extremely terrifying. From the start of this battle until now, she had used her trump cards many times. There was the flying shuttle imprinted with undying aura, the blood-stained demon-fall pestle, as well as the yellowing scriptures with freakish defensive strength. Moreover, the Qi, in the Jade Pendant, condensed by the power of order, was a fatal threat to anyone. It was no exaggeration to say that if it were any other Jueqin great ancestor, they would have died long ago if they were attacked by this series of trump cards. Even an immortal figure might not be able to avoid it. Therefore, even though Lin Sun had gained the upper hand, he still didn't agree. No one knew whether Qi Lingyun had other trump cards. You want me to bow down to you? Qi Lingyun's eyes were cold and disdainful. I, Qi Lingyun, have never bowed down to anyone except my parents. Do you think you're qualified? She was in a dangerous situation, but she still had a kind of pride branded in her bones. Then I'll help you bow down to me. Lin Sun suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Qi Lingyun's throat. Qi Lingyun's fingers turned over, and the yellowed scriptures suddenly turned into a scroll. She waved it in the air. Boom! The obscure and inexplicable light shot out, and the horrible killing power crushed towards Lin Sun. Following that, her figure transformed into countless golden water droplets that flew in all directions. Each water droplet elongated in the void and turned into misty golden threads. Each of them was exactly the same, and it was impossible to tell which water droplet was her real body. Without a doubt, this was an incredible technique. However, Lin Sun looked indifferent. He used Abyssal Sword Cauldron to crush the obscure light emerging from the yellowed scroll. On the other hand, a large abyss suddenly surged out into appearance around him. It blotted out the sky and completely enveloped the entire hall, and it emanated an extremely terrifying, devouring force. Rumble! The golden threads that covered the sky instantly fell into the boundless abyss, and they seemed as if they were fiercely crushed by a large hand. They exploded without end and were crushed amidst rumbling and rumbling. One of the golden threads shuddered before revealing Qi Lingyun's figure. However, she was in an extremely sorry state. Her hair was disheveled, her dress was disheveled, her face was snowy white, and there was blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Open! She let out an angry scream, and a silver divine flame condensed between her white fingers. She gently waved it, and as the silver divine flame flew out, a hole was burned in the abyss. Seeing that Qi Lingyun was about to break free, Lin Sun suddenly rushed over. He grabbed her snow-white neck from behind. At this instant, Qi Lingyun's figure froze on the spot. She didn't dare move in the slightest while her eyes changed indeterminately. There was astonishment and indescribable rage within them. She is the daughter of the dignified Qi clan's patriarch of the eighth heaven, but now she is like a prey, being grabbed by the neck from behind. What do you want? Qi Lingyun was in complete panic. The hand that was choking her neck was simply like the filthiest thing in the world, and it caused goosebumps to arise all over her body. She was on the verge of being unable to endure it. Lower your head. Lin Sun answered casually. He exerted force with his palm and fingers, and Qi Lingyun's snow-white neck bent under the pressure. Her pretty face turned red, and her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Being forced to lower her head in such a rough way made her so ashamed and angry that she was about to go crazy. Even though she struggled desperately, it was in vain. Her cultivation had been suppressed, and her head was pressed down uncontrollably little by little. At the moment when she bowed her head, Qi Lingyun's inner pride and dignity seemed to be completely shattered. She completely lost control and screamed, "Ah!" Her voice was full of anger and hatred. It resounded through the hall and spread outside the central immortal court. It was enough to frighten ghosts and gods. She had never hated a person so much. Never. Seeing her like this, Lin Sun didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex. Instead, he felt an indescribable sense of pleasure. Now, it's useless even if you shout yourself hoarse. Lin Sun brought Qi Lingyun in front of him and slapped her beautiful face, causing her mouth and nose to bleed and see stars before her eyes. She was dumbfounded. Then, her body trembled violently. It was obvious that she was angered to the extreme. Her eyes were filled with hatred. This was the first time in her life that she was slapped. The feeling made her go crazy. Lin Sun, kill me if you have the guts. Kill me. Qi Lingyun gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. Her expression was livid. It was hard to imagine that she was still the elegant and composed woman from before. I said that I will make you bow down to me. How can I kill you so easily? Lin Sun's words made Qi Lingyun feel as if she was poured with a bucket of cold water. She could vaguely guess the ending she was about to face, and she couldn't help but feel despair. Perhaps the most terrifying thing in this world wasn't death, but being unable to live or die. Qi Lingyun stared at Lin Sun and said in a hoarse voice, "Just you wait. I won't let you go. The Qi clan will never let a demon like you live." Lin Sun smiled lightly and said, "I believe Zhongli Xiao, Qi Pajuan, and Mu Yi thought the same as you before they died. Unfortunately, since I roamed the world until now, anyone who threatened me like this, no matter who it was or what power it was, didn't have a good ending. If the Qi clan becomes my enemy, they're bound to be no exception." As soon as he finished speaking, he exerted force in his hand and directly knocked Qi Lingyun out, and then he threw her into the abyssal sword cauldron and suppressed her alive. After that, Lin Sun went straight to the central immortal court. On the peak of the towering mountain, he stood alone, overlooking the land below. There were no traces of cultivators on the plateau, and there was only a vortex passageway floating in the sky above the plateau. That was the exit. Obviously, those cultivators that had fled earlier had left through the vortex passageway. Fortunately, they didn't stay behind. Lin Sun thought of Xiang Xiyun and Lu Xiangxue, and he heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Before the battle erupted, he'd already warned them via voice transmission. Leave immediately and don't get involved in this slaughter. At the beginning, Xiang Xiyun and Lu Xiangxue both refused and insisted on staying because they were worried that Lin Sun would be defeated. They'd rather stay and help him than leave. But as Lin Sun displayed his invincible might and swept away all the heroes, the two were shocked and finally changed their minds and left in advance. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun turned around and returned to the central immortal court. Inside the immortal palace, it was a mess. The thick smell of blood filled the air in the white mist. Almost all the corpses of the enemies were gone, and only some relics were scattered in different areas. Purple gold gourd, sky-throwing seal, great halberd, vase, ancient lamp. Further away, the primordial tree of myriad Tao quietly dropped a rain of green light, peaceful and tranquil. Lin Sun waved his sleeves and collected the spoils on the ground one by one. Then he casually sat under the primordial tree of myriad Tao. The battle finally came to an end. In the first round, he entered the battlefield of gods and killed Nan Tianba, Nan Tianzhong, and Nan Yongxiang, causing a great sensation. In the second round, the Great Hunt, Li Henshui, and other cultivators of the Li clan were all wiped out by Lin Sun with a bloody and brilliant record. He became the first in the Great Hunt. And in the third round, he was also the only one who won the title of the Chosen One and entered the Central Immortal Court. Here, he comprehended the Tao under the primordial tree and unintentionally attracted an unprecedented great tribulation. At the same time that his Tao and technique fused to the extreme and made a breakthrough, he also passed the Ancestor Ascension tribulation, allowing his cultivation to step into the Ancestor Ascension realm in one go. In the Emperor realm of the world, Emperor Ancestor was the most respected. On the road to the top, Emperor Ancestor Ju was the king, and Lin Sun was invincible in the Emperor Ancestor realm. The reason was that the complete Tao of Ancestor realm he mastered was not one, but he could condense all the Tao into the Tao of Ancestor realm. This was fundamentally different from the ordinary ancestors of one Tao. Therefore, he could be called the Supreme Myriad Tao Ancestor. How terrifying was this realm? The incomparably bloody battle from before had vividly displayed how monstrous this realm was. Even the powerful Emperor Ancestor Juexian from the Eighth Heaven, such as Mu Yi, Zhongli Xiao, and Qi Pejuan, were easily suppressed in a head-on confrontation. How terrifying was Qi Lingyun, who mastered all kinds of heaven-defying trump cards and possessed incredible secret magic, but it was difficult for him to resist Lin Sun's killing. In this battle alone, nearly 100 cultivators were killed by Lin Sun, including many overlord existences such as Emperor Ancestor and peak Eighth Heaven Emperors. It was no exaggeration to say that this battle had already established Lin Sun's invincibility in this realm and his qualification to be called a master above the Emperor path. The primordial tree sprinkled hundreds of millions of green light rain, bathing Lin Sun's figure in it. The previous battle was like a rare tempering, which helped him consolidate the cultivation of the Ancestor realm that he had just broken through. Now that he meditated, he had a different feeling, the realm of returning to the Ancestors. It meant that his cultivation began to enter a state of seeking the original origin of the Tao. Ancestor was the original meaning. In this realm, cultivators were comprehending the phenomena of the world, the birth of all things in the universe, and the most primitive profundities of the Grand Tao that were revealed by it. And above the Ancestor realm was the immortal Tao. The immortal realm was a higher level of the Tao after seeing through the original mystery of the formation of all things in the world. Just like the name of this realm, those who set foot in this realm could live as long as the heaven and be immortal. Chapter 26:51. The path towards the eternal Tao was divided into 3 realms. They were heavenly longevity, nirvana, and transcendence. The heavenly longevity realm was the first threshold of the eternal path towards the Tao. As its name implied, it was to live as long as the heavens. The so-called heaven actually represented the Grand Tao. As long as the Grand Tao remained, one's lifespan would be boundless, and it could be said to be eternal. In the Emperor Tao Ancestor realm, the secrets of the ancestors were the key to open the door to the immortal realm, the heavenly longevity realm. Seeing through the earliest profundities of everything in the universe was equivalent to grasping the complete essence of a world, and it was sufficient to allow one's body to undergo a transformation, live as long as the heavens, and enjoy eternity. However, This threshold had trapped countless cultivators since the ancient times until now, and there might not even be a single eternal figure amongst 10,000 imperial ancestors. This realm was obscure, and it wasn't something that could be touched by persevering and diligent cultivation. Instead, one needed heavenly luck, opportunity, great wisdom, and great willpower to have any hope of touching the threshold of this realm. Ever since the primordial era ended and the starry sky ancient path was covered by the Forbidden Order, the highest cultivation level in the current world was only at the Emperor Ancestor realm. No one could reach the immortal realm. Why? The core of it was that the starry sky ancient path didn't possess the fortune to allow those ancestor realm figures to step onto the path of the eternal Tao. This was also the reason why all those who had ambitions towards a higher path of Tao longed to head to the eternal true world over the course of countless years. Because only in the eternal true world existed the Kismet, and the serendipity needed to step into the path of immortality. Of course, just luck and opportunities were far from enough. Great wisdom and perseverance were also required. However, for Lin Sun, it was still too early to talk about seeking the path of immortality. He just stepped into the ancestor realm, and his current cultivation was still at the early stage of this realm. It was far from the time to consider attaining immortality. Time flew by. The primordial myriad Tao tree swayed and rustled like the chanting of scriptures. Lin Sun sat still under the tree with his legs crossed, feeling all the things he had just experienced and consolidating his Tao fruit. In the last era, the heavenly chosen battle would end on the same day that the assembly of the immortal court came to an end. According to this time, there were still 9 days before the end of the god's relic for Lin Sun. In other words, he still had 9 days to prepare for his departure. At the same time, outside the ruins of the gods, as the cultivators that had escaped the ruins of the gods returned, news of what had occurred during the Grand Hunt and the Ascendant Stage had spread as well. For a time, it caused a huge uproar. Is Lin Sun really so powerful? Countless people were shocked by Lin Sun's bloody slaughter in the secret realm of gods. They couldn't believe it. In the hearts of people, the top forces from the seventh heaven, such as the 4 great clans of the East Imperial family, are already like the rulers of the heavens, and they can only look up to and revere them. But in the Great Hunt, Li Henshui and other Li clansmen from one of the 4 East royal clans were all killed by Lin Sun, the one and only heaven's chosen one, the primordial myriad Tao tree, overcoming an unprecedented tribulation, killing a group of heroes in the central immortal court. On the other hand, when they found out about Lin Sun's performance in the central immortal court, many people were shocked to the point their hearts trembled, and they were utterly unable to maintain their composure while their expressions changed. Before the opening of the god's relic, many people in Chaotian City doubted whether Lin Sun, who was targeted by many forces, would dare to participate in it. But now, Lin Sun had become the most dazzling and ruthless person in the god's relic. There is no need to mention the casualties suffered by the 4 clans of the East Imperial family. Just the number of nobles from the 8th heaven who died in his hands was enough to shock and terrify anyone. Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pajuan, Mu Yi. Which one of them wasn't the Zhu Ying Emperor ancestor who shone brightly in the eternal true world? Any one of their identities could make the immortal emperor clans of the 7th heaven wary. But now, these nobles from the top 10 immortal forces of the 8th heaven were all killed by Lin Sun alone in the central immortal court. If this matter were to spread back to the eternal true world, it would definitely cause a huge uproar, and the whole world would be shocked. The Fu family, one of the immortal forces of the 8th heaven, has made it clear that they will no longer recruit Lin Sun. They have also called upon the heroes of the world to kill this evil person together. Very soon, a piece of news spread from Chaotian City, causing another sensation. No one would forget that when Lin Sun entered Chaotian City and took the test on the realm battle steel, an old man from the Fu family took the initiative to invite him to join the Fu family. But now, the Fu family changed their mind and expressed their firm determination to get rid of Lin Sun. Obviously, under such circumstances, the Fu family doesn't want to go against the trend and decisively gave up on recruiting ruthless Lin. Who can be blamed for this? Just in the Central Immortal Court alone, the descendants of the Qi family, Mu family, and Zhongli family were killed by vicious Lin. You should know that in the 8th heaven, although the top 10 immortal giants are in a competitive relationship, when it comes to dealing with outsiders, they are united. Does this mean that from now on, ruthless Lin can no longer be recruited by the 8th heaven? Discussions arose everywhere, and everyone couldn't calm down. Lin Sun was too tyrannical. He killed countless heroes in the mysterious realm, and the blood he stirred up was too shocking. Even if they could walk out of it alive, they were doomed to die in the end. In the vast starry sky, the atmosphere was so heavy that people couldn't breathe. Everyone was waiting. Things are getting tricky. On the side of the 4 Eastern Imperial clans, Nan Faidu, who had a willow beard fluttering in the wind, frowned. Who would have thought that a descendant of Feng Xiyuan would dare to do such a daring thing? Gu Lingjun, who was dressed in a golden robe and holding a snow-white flying sword between her fingers, also had a gloomy expression on her beautiful face. If the 4 immortal forces of the Qi family, Zhongli family, and Mu family hear the news and come, I'm afraid that it will be extremely disadvantageous to our actions. Li Shangjuan, who was riding on a green centipede and holding a purple jade ruler, didn't hide his worry at all. Hearing this, Nan Faidu and Gu Lingjun were both silent, and the expression in their eyes fluctuated. Originally, they were waiting here just to capture Lin Sun and seize his fortune. But who would have thought that the situation would develop to this point, completely beyond their imagination? Lin Sun was bold enough to kill the nobles of the 8th heaven, which was no different from piercing the sky. Under such circumstances, how could the immortal forces of the 8th heaven let it go? In this way, it wouldn't be easy for the 4 Eastern Imperial clans to capture Lin Sun first. Snatching Lin Sun from the immortal forces? That was no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. What made Nan Faidu and the others most worried was that this time, almost all the experts of the 4 Eastern Imperial clans suffered heavy casualties, and only a few survived in the end. Under such circumstances, even if it wasn't for Lin Sun's fortune, they wouldn't be able to tolerate Lin Sun's survival. But the key was that Lin Sun hadn't come out of the God's Relic yet, and once the immortal forces arrived, they wouldn't have the chance to kill Lin Sun. This damned bastard, he's too good at causing trouble. Nan Faidu couldn't help but curse. Gu Lingjun and Li Shangjuan's expressions weren't good either. They had seen troublemakers before, but they had never seen one like Lin Sun. They couldn't help but suspect that if there was a descendant of the Eternal God clan among the experts who entered the God's secret realm, Lin Sun wouldn't be so polite. Look, the power of the rules of the God's secret realm is collapsing and cracking. Yun Jiao, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. 2 beams of light shot out from his eyes as he gazed at the God's relic in the distance. Others might not be able to sense it, but immortal forces like them could keenly sense that the God's relic was changing like the wings of a butterfly. It was like an ancient building that had been eroded by the wind for too long, and it was slowly decaying and cracking. Doesn't this mean that we can take this opportunity to kill our way into the God's relic? Nan Faidu's eyes lit up, and he was in high spirits. If that's the case, then we can kill this kid before the immortal giants arrive. Gu Lingjun's lips curled up into a smile. All right, it's decided. Li Shangjuan, who had the demeanor of an immortal, had an undisguised killing intent in the depths of his eyes. This time, all the experts of the Li clan had been wiped out, which made Li Shangjuan feel extremely humiliated and angry. Chaotian City. Blue Sparrow was dumbfounded. There was only one thought in her mind. What should she do now? What happened in the God's Relic had long been spread back to Chaotian City, causing a sensation in the whole city. Countless cultivators were dumbfounded. Even the Cyan Sparrow didn't expect Lin Sun to be so ferocious. Not only did he kill the powerhouses of the 4 Eastern Emperor clans, he even killed several immortal giants from the 8th heaven. Originally, Blue Sparrow planned to ask the Yuan family for help. Even if she couldn't help Lin Sun on the surface, it was possible to help Lin Sun secretly. But now, Blue Sparrow decisively gave up this idea. After all, there was no friendship between Lin Sun and the Yuan family. Under such circumstances, how could the Yuan family offend the immortal forces of the eighth heaven for Lin Sun? Even Blue Sparrow couldn't do it. If only Miss was here. Blue Sparrow wailed in her heart, anxious like an ant on a hot pot. What should she do? What should she do? In this world, who could save Lin Sun from the fire and water in such a situation? And in Chaotian City, after the shock, all the cultivators couldn't help but have the same thought. In such a situation, when they left the god's relic, would Lin Sun still have a chance to survive? Of course. In a tea house, Yinlu, who had entered the vast 1,000 battle domains with Lin Sun, had an unfathomable luster in his eyes. The skinny monk from the minor thunderclap of the great thunderclap world thought in his heart, the Fengcun lineage has been plotting for an eternity. If we were to die here, the path of cultivation would be too boring. Chapter 2652. Under the primordial Tao tree, Lin Sun woke up from his meditation, and his cultivation was completely stabilized. The extermination progenitor realm was indeed different. The power he grasped was far stronger than before. Lin Sun reckoned that with his current combat strength, he probably couldn't find many people in the same realm who could fight him. After all, he could already kill an emperor ancestor when he was in the 8th stage of the extermination progenitor realm. Now that he had become a peerless progenitor, he didn't even put ordinary emperor ancestors in his eyes. Even other peerless progenitors couldn't withstand his attacks. The defeat of Mu Yi, Zhongli Xiao, Lin Feng, and the others was the best proof. I just don't know if I'll be able to contend against a heavenly longevity realm expert, Lin Sun pondered. In the previous battles, Qi Lingyun had used many trump cards imprinted with the will of an immortal realm expert, but they were all neutralized by the abyssal sword cauldron. Although it was just the power of an immortal and not a true immortal, it gave Lin Sun a lot of confidence. The progenitor realm was known as the natural chasm of the Emperor's path. No one had ever crossed it, but didn't he still break through in the end? The path of immortality might be more terrifying and supreme than the Emperor's path, but it didn't mean that it couldn't be killed by someone who surpassed it. However, Lin Sun had never fought with an immortal before, so he didn't know much about the power of such an existence. He wasn't sure if he could fight them in battle. Although his cultivation was heaven-defying, he was still in the early stage of the progenitor realm. There's probably a trap set up outside the god's secret realm, waiting for me to get out. Lin Sun got up from his meditation, and his eyes were calm. He made a decision after thinking for a while. Buzz, the Tower of Ceaseless, appeared, followed by Ling Xuanzi and Uncle Master Kongju. What's going on? Could it be that you intend to take the initiative to ask me for help? Ling Xuanzi had a surprised look on his face. Kongju's hair and beard were messy. He squatted on the ground, holding a jar of winding stream goblet and sipping on it, looking like he was drunk. Lin Sun looked at Ling Xuanzi and said, "With your ability, you shouldn't be unaware of what happened in the ruins of the gods, right?" Ling Xuanzi scoffed and chuckled. "Little junior brother, you're too kind. I was only able to catch a glimpse of a few scenes." TSK. This is the root of the immortal Tao, the primordial myriad Tao tree. It really is boundlessly profound and can be called an era treasure. As he spoke, he stared at the primordial tree and began to size it up. His eyes were bright and carried a hint of passion. "Little junior brother, why don't you give this tree to me? Perhaps I can use this tree to deduce some things that belong to the previous era." "Not a chance." Lin Sun refused without hesitation. With a wave of his sleeve, the primordial Tao tree turned into a verdant glow and plunged into his body. It took root in his life Emperor realm, forming a nice contrast with the chaos tree that had taken root here before. "Sigh, little junior brother, you're still guarding against me like a thief." Ling Xuanzi sighed, looking like he was hurt. Lin Sun said, "Fourth senior brother, I have a favor to ask." Ling Xuanzi raised his eyebrows and seemed to realize something. He stopped joking and said, "What is it? You should be clear about the current situation. I hope you can leave with martial uncle," Lin Sun said seriously. Ling Xuanzi was stunned. You're not planning to fight against an immortal realm enemy alone, are you? Lin Sun said, do you think I have a choice? Ling Xuanzi seemed to be very angry. He rolled his eyes and pointed at his nose. Me? Do you treat me as if I don't exist? I'm puzzled. Why do I have such a low position in your heart? Lin Sun was suspicious. You're not in the Emperor realm? Ling Xuanzi's handsome face darkened. Do you think that the only person who can help you to trample on evil God Dishi and make him open his heart on his own initiative to reveal the humiliation of being cuckolded is merely an Emperor realm? Lin Sun stared at Ling Xuanzi for a moment and said, but you really look like you're only in the Emperor realm. Divine objects conceal themselves, and so do humans. Back in the core ruins, fourth senior brother didn't plan to bully you, and he didn't use his higher cultivation to attack you. That's why he suppressed his cultivation and fought you fairly. Otherwise, I would have been able to defeat you with a single finger. Ling Xuanzi raised his fingertips with a proud face. Lin Sun was startled and said, so, you can fight against immortals? What do you mean fight? Killing them like slaughtering chickens. Ling Xuanzi said without thinking. Lin Sun still didn't believe it. He shook his head and said, forget it. I know you're saying this because you don't want to leave. I understand your feelings as a senior brother, but things are already so serious. Do you want martial uncle to suffer like you? Ling Xuanzi was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at Lin Sun and said, you're still the lotus in Master's eyes. I didn't expect you to be so stupid. Not to mention me. Do you think our martial uncle Kong Ju has really become a useless person who lost all his cultivation? Lin Sun frowned and glanced at Kong Ju, who was drunk and paralyzed on the ground. He said, no, it's still too risky. Master said that there's something wrong with martial uncle's state of mind. How can we put the hope of resolving this crisis on martial uncle? Looking at Lin Sun's stubborn look, Ling Xuanzi was so angry that he gritted his teeth and said, little junior brother, can't you have more confidence in people? I'm begging you. Can you be merciful and let me and martial uncle Kong Ju stay? Lin Sun also sighed and said with a helpless look, this is what you asked for. If something happens, don't regret it. Huh? Do you think fourth senior brother is a person who will regret? I've been suppressed by Master for countless years. Have you ever seen me regret it? Ling Xuanzi laughed, but the next moment his smile froze. He realized something and pointed at Lin Sun's nose, saying, little junior brother, you've schemed against me. Lin Sun was surprised. Why do you say this, senior brother? Ling Xuanzi's expression was uncertain. He had realized that he had been fooled. He had said a long time ago that unless Lin Sun took the initiative to ask him for help, he would not show up. But now, it became that he took the initiative to ask Lin Sun to help him. You bastard, you're still trying to act innocent after getting a bargain. You're simply rotten to the core. If it was someone else who tried to trick me like this, they would have died 1,000 times over. Ling Xuanzi had a wretched expression on his face. He was depressed, angry, and helpless. He couldn't regret it. He just said that he had never regretted being suppressed by Master for countless years. Now he changed his mind. Wasn't it tantamount to slapping himself in the face? The most hateful thing was that Lin Sun still pretended not to know, which made Ling Xuanzi gnash his teeth with hatred. He felt like a goose pecked in the eye by a goose. Little junior brother, I can help you, but you have to lend me Endless Tower and 3,000 floating sinks, said Ling Xuanzi. Lin Sun said solemnly, senior brother, we should work together at this time. Even if you don't say it, I will lend you these 2 treasures. As he spoke, he handed Endless Tower and 3,000 floating sinks to Ling Xuanzi. Looking at Lin Sun's righteous attitude, Ling Xuanzi's lips twitched, and he said, little junior brother, you win. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing in the end. Just as Ling Xuanzi guessed, under such circumstances, how could he let go of such a good helper like Ling Xuanzi? Of course, it was impossible to beg, so he could only use some tricks. Ling Xuanzi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh when he saw this. These were harmless jokes in the end. Conversely, he felt rather happy because Lin Sun was willing to do this. At the very least, this little junior brother that had always been extremely resistant to him showed signs of accepting him. This was naturally extremely good for Ling Xuanzi. No one knew that to someone like him who had been abandoned by his parents at a young age and was viewed as a great medicine by his master, Minuscule Mountain was like his home in his heart. This was also the reason why he never complained, even when he was suppressed by his master for countless years. Minuscule Mountain was a soft place in his heart that he had to protect. I heard that Old Man Dish has already escaped, and when he did, he even killed many undying beings. If I'm not wrong, that old man is definitely hiding outside the god's secret realm. Ling Xuanzi spoke with fervor and assurance. To us, ordinary immortal realm figures don't have to be afraid of anything at all, but we have to be careful when dealing with Old Man Dishy. Back then, when I confronted him in front of the ancient well, I had already noticed that this fellow was a tough one. He was suppressed for 1,000,000 years in the previous era, and after the era was destroyed, he was lucky enough to survive. This kind of person is very terrifying. Lin Sun's heart shivered. If it wasn't for Ling Xuanzi's reminder, he would have almost forgotten about the potential threat that was Dish. Dish was indeed an unimaginably terrifying opponent. After breaking free, even though he was surrounded by many undying beings, he still managed to kill some of his opponents and destroy the 9th pass of the Deathless. This was something that had never happened before. Rumor had it that Dish died in the siege, and some said that he escaped with injuries. But both Lin Sun and Ling Xuanzi firmly believed that the old man was definitely still alive. It was destined that he wouldn't miss the opportunity of the god's ruins. After all, as a terrifying existence in the last era, Dish should know how extraordinary the Central Immortal Court's fortune was. Apart from that, Lin Sun also suspected that the good fortune jade disc in his hand was enough to attract Dish over. It's really a murderous calamity. Lin Sun sighed. The 4 Eastern Imperial clans, the undying beings of the 8th heaven, and Dish, all of these murderous calamities were enough to make anyone in the world tremble in fear and despair. Now, this is satisfying. Ling Xuanzi licked his lips as a wisp of wanton madness appeared on his handsome face. After being suppressed by our master for so many years, this world actually doesn't know of my existence. This time, it's my turn to make an appearance. P.S. Starting tomorrow, Goldfish will be on a business trip for 4 to 5 days, but we will do our best to ensure that the updates are as usual.